I was staring at my fireplace the other night, just looking at it. I had a glass of wine, the lights were low, and I was just watching the smoke curl up and, disappear. And it hit me that we treat these things like magic tricks. You put wood in a box, light it on fire, and the smoke just vanishes. It goes up.
Unless, of course, it doesn't.
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
Unless it doesn't. And when it doesn't, when that smoke decides to just roll back into the living room and set off every single alarm in the house, it feels like a personal betrayal. Because
Yeah.
we tend to think of a chimney as a completely passive thing.
Yeah.
Just a brick pipe, a hole in the roof, gravity, but like in reverse, right?
That is the single biggest misconception in all of building science. I really mean that.
Wow.
And honestly, it's why so many homes have these chronic draft issues. We treat the chimney like it's a garbage chute for smoke, but the source material we're looking at today, well, it paints a completely different picture.
It certainly does. We are diving into a document that is, I have to say, a little intimidating. It's a professional diagnostic protocol titled 100 Factors Influencing Chimney Draft and Performance.
It is a massive list.
And it's not just, is the damper open or, is the wood wet?
Yeah.
We're talking about a list that breaks down the physics, the geometry, the meteorology, even the chemistry of what is happening inside that brick column. When you said this over, I was just floored by the sheer volume. 100 distinct factors.
100. And that's not padding. Each one of those factors can be the difference between a cozy night by the fire and, well, a house full of carbon monoxide. The core argument here, the thing you have to get, is that a chimney isn't a pipe. It is an engine.
An engine.
Absolutely. It is a thermally powered engine. It relies on a very, very delicate balance of pressure differentials to function. It literally converts heat energy into motion. And this list of 100 factors, it's basically a diagnostic manual for when that engine stalls.
Okay, so that is our mission for this deep dive. We're going to look at this invisible engine. We're going to try and demystify why the smoke goes up, why the house sometimes seems to fight to pull it back down, and we're going to walk through the most surprising factors on this list. We'll break it down into the big mechanics: height, heat, and wind. And then get into some of the hidden culprits inside your walls.
Sounds like a plan.
Let's start with the fuel for this engine. And I don't mean the wood. The source material is very specific about the physics of draft. It says draft is not motion, it's pressure. Now, stop me for a second.
Right. And this is where most people get tripped up right away.
Mhm.
You see the smoke moving, so you think draft is the speed of the air. But it's not. Draft is actually a static measurement of suction. Even if you, say, cap the top of the chimney so no air can move at all, you can still measure draft. It's the difference in pressure between the air inside the flue and the air outside the house.
So high pressure pushes and low pressure sucks.
Exactly. And what the chimney does is it creates a low pressure zone. It relies pretty much entirely on one thing: buoyancy.
Buoyancy. Okay, so like a beach ball in a pool.
Exactly like that, yeah.
Yeah.
But sort of inverted. In a pool, air is lighter than water, so it just bubbles right up.
Yeah.
In our atmosphere, hot air is lighter, less dense than cold air. And because the combustion gases from your fire are hot, they are significantly lighter than the heavy cold air surrounding your house. They want to float.
So the hot gas isn't really rising so much as it's being squeezed up by the heavy air that's all around it.
That is a great way to put it. The heavy outside air is pushing down, is trying to get into the house, and the light, hot air in the chimney creates kind of a pressure deficit that allows that heavy air to push in through the stove intake. That flow is what feeds the fire.
So the fire creates the heat creates the lightness creates the suction, which in turn feeds the fire. It's a loop.
It's a self-sustaining cycle, but, and this is a huge but, it is incredibly weak.
How weak are we talking?
Well, we measure draft in something called inches of water column, or pascals. A perfectly functioning residential chimney might only generate a draft of roughly 0.05 to 0.1 inches of water column.
That sounds microscopic.
It is tiny. I mean, to give you some context, if you close a bedroom door and the air conditioning kicks on, the pressure difference across that door might be higher than what your chimney is producing. A standard bathroom exhaust fan creates significantly more negative pressure than a chimney does.
So the chimney engine is fragile.
It is incredibly fragile, it's easily overpowered, and that is why we have a list of 100 factors, because almost anything, a gust of wind, a cold brick, a kitchen fan, a slightly too short pipe, any of those can break that delicate pressure cycle.
Okay, let's get into the mechanics of building this pressure. The first major variable the source highlights is height. This is item number 1 on the list. Why is height the starting point?
Because height provides leverage. Think of the column of hot air inside the chimney as a weight on a scale, but in reverse. It's a column of anti-weight. The taller that column of hot light gas is, the more lift it generates relative to the heavy cold air outside.
So generally speaking, taller's better.
Generally, yes. I mean, that's why you see those industrial smokestacks that are hundreds of feet high. They need a massive draft to pull exhaust through all kinds of filters and scrubbers. In a house, if you have a short, squat chimney, say on a single-story addition or a cabin, you simply don't have enough vertical leverage. You have a very short column of hot air, which means very little pressure difference.
But the source mentions a point of diminishing returns. It implies you can't just build a 50-foot chimney on a ranch house and expect it to solve all your problems.
No, absolutely not. And that's because of the second critical variable, heat. You have to keep the gas hot. Remember, the engine runs on that density difference. If you build a chimney that is way too tall, the gas has to travel a long way to get out. As it travels up that masonry, it loses heat to the bricks.
And if it loses heat?
It gains density, it gets heavy. If the smoke cools down too much before it hits the cop, it just stops rising. It essentially stalls out inside the pipe. You end up with this plug of lukewarm, heavy smog that just sits there blocking the flow.
Which I'm guessing leads to the condensation issues mentioned later in the list.
Exactly. This is the chemistry part. If that gas cools below the dew point, all that moisture and chemical vapor in the smoke, it just turns into liquid. If you're burning wood, that turns into creosote, which is basically tar. If you're burning gas, it turns into acidic water that literally eats the mortar joints.
So it's a Goldilocks situation. You need the height to create the pressure, but if you go too high, you lose the heat that drives the whole pressure system in the first place.
Precisely. You are balancing leverage against heat loss. It's a constant trade-off.
Okay, so we've built our chimney to the perfect height, but we don't live in a vacuum. We live in a world with weather. And this brings us to section 2 of our discussion, the battle against the wind.
Wind. Wind is the great disruptor.
The source goes into a lot of detail about turbulence and pressure zones. It paints this picture of wind not just blowing past a house, but really interacting with it.
It's fluid dynamics. You have to stop thinking of wind as just air moving and start thinking of it like water in a river. When a river hits a big rock, it doesn't just slide over it smoothly. It tumbles, it swirls, it gets chaotic.
The source uses the term wind shadow. I love that term.
It's a perfect description. Imagine a boulder in that fast-moving river. Behind the boulder, downstream, the water is just chaotic. It swirls in these eddies, and sometimes it even flows backward upstream toward the rock. That is the shadow of turbulence. Your roof creates that exact same shadow in the air.
So if your chimney happens to terminate inside that chaotic pocket of air,
then the wind pressure is totally erratic. Sometimes it might pull, but often it pushes. It can literally blow the exhaust back down the throat of the chimney. You're trying to push smoke up, and the wind is just slapping it back down.
This brings us to one of the most specific, most actionable rules in this entire document, the 3-2-10 rule.
The 3-2-10 rule. If you own a home with a chimney, or if you're building one, you should memorize this. It is the golden standard for chimney termination.
It sounds like a locker combination. 3-2-10. Can you walk us through what these numbers actually mean?
Okay, so it's a formula, and it's designed to ensure the chimney top sits in clean, laminar airflow above all that turbulence. Here is the breakdown. The 3 stands for 3 feet. The chimney must extend at least 3 feet above the point where it penetrates the roofline.
Okay, so at a bare minimum, I need 3 feet of brick or pipe sticking out of my roof.
Minimum. And that's mostly for fire safety, just to keep sparks off the shingles. But that's usually not enough for a good draft. That brings us to the 2 and the 10. The rule states that the top of the chimney must be at least 2 feet higher than any part of the building within 10 feet horizontally.
Okay, let's visualize this. I'm standing on my chimney cap with a tape measure. I extended 10 feet out in a big circle around me.
Exactly. And if within that 10-foot circle you hit a roof peak, a dormer window, a second-story wall, a parapet, anything, your chimney has to be 2 feet taller than that obstacle.
So it's not just about how tall the chimney is from the ground. It's about how tall it is relative to all the stuff right next to it.
Correct. It's all about clearing that wind shadow.
This seems like the kind of thing that gets messed up all the time during renovations.
Oh, constantly. We see it all the time. Someone has a perfectly working fireplace. Then they build a beautiful 2-story addition next to their existing 1-story living room. And suddenly, the old fireplace starts smoking like a freight train.
And they probably think the chimney's broken or clogged.
They call a sweep and say, is it clogged? But it's not clogged. The new addition created this massive wind shadow, a high-pressure turbulent zone right over the old chimney. They violated the 3-2-10 rule without even touching the fireplace. They effectively suffocated the engine.
That is wild. It really, really emphasizes that the chimney is part of the whole house ecosystem. And speaking of the house ecosystem, let's move from the roof to the walls. There is a section in the source material that compares interior versus exterior chimneys.
Ah, the tale of two chimneys.
The source seems to frame this almost as a moral battle. The good chimney versus the bad chimney. The bad chimney being the one that's attached to the outside wall.
In the building science community, the exterior chimney is definitely the villain.
But I mean, come on, they look so good. That classic look, you know, the big brick stack going up the outside wall. It's classic architecture.
Oh, they look great. I'm not going to argue with you on aesthetics. Aesthetically, they're classic, but thermally, they're just a disaster. And here's why. The thermal envelope.
The warm bubble of the house.
Right. An interior chimney, it runs up through the center of the house. It's surrounded by bedrooms and living spaces that are heated to, 70 degrees? The bricks stay warm, the flue liner stays warm. So when you go to light a fire, the air inside that chimney is already kind of buoyant. It's basically preheated. It wants to go up.
But an exterior chimney.
It has 3 faces exposed to the freezing cold, to the wind, the rain, the snow. It acts as a massive thermal bridge. It just sucks heat out of the flue.
And this leads to a phenomenon the list calls the cold plug.
The cold plug. And it's not a metaphor, it's a physical reality.
Yeah.
You have a column of air inside that exterior chimney that is freezing cold. Maybe it's 20 degrees Fahrenheit. That air is dense, heavy, and totally stagnant. It sits on top of your fireplace like a lead weight.
So you light a match.
And the little bit of heat from that match, it just hits the cold plug and bounces right off. It isn't strong enough to lift that heavy column of air. So where does the smoke go? It takes the path of least resistance, which is right back into your living room.
You have to physically push that plug out.
You do. You essentially have to burp the chimney before it will even work. We'll talk about how to do that in the user error section, but just from a structural standpoint, the exterior chimney is fighting you from the moment you strike the match.
And even after it starts, the source implies you're still fighting an uphill battle, but with chemistry this time.
You are. Because as the smoke rises, those cold bricks are constantly sucking the heat out of the gas. The smoke cools down incredibly rapidly. This brings us right back to creosote. In an exterior chimney, the gas temperature drops so fast that the creosote condenses on the liner walls in these massive amounts. Exterior chimneys are notorious for getting dirty faster and, frankly, having more chimney fires.
So it's a compounding penalty. It's harder to start, harder to keep going, and more dangerous to operate.
Exactly. If you are building a custom home and you have a choice, put the chimney inside the thermal envelope. Period. End of story.
Okay, let's get into the weeds a bit. We've covered the big picture height, wind, location. Now I want to look at the structural sabotage section of the list. These are the construction flaws that are, hidden inside the masonry.
Right, and this is where the 100 factors list really shines. It points out things you would never, ever think of unless you were an engineer or, looking down the flue with a camera.
One thing that surprised me was the focus on flue sizing. We're talking items 29 through 34. I think the average person, myself included, assumes bigger is better.
Yeah.
If I have a huge flue, I'll get a huge draft, right?
That is the superhighway fallacy. People think more lanes, more traffic flow, but fluids, they don't work like cars.
How so?
Okay, so imagine you have a small wood stove with a 6-inch exhaust pipe, but you vent it into a massive 12 by 12 masonry flue. You are dumping a small, tight stream of gas into this cavernous space.
The gas expands.
It expands rapidly. And per the ideal gas law, when a gas expands, it cools. So the smoke hits this big cold space, expands, loses its heat, and instantly loses its velocity. Instead of shooting up, it just kind of swirls around lazily. It creates what we call residence time.
Residence time. That sounds like the smoke is moving in and getting comfortable.
It basically is. The smoke hangs out in the chimney for too long. And because it's moving so slowly, it cools down even more, drops its creosote load, and kills the draft. The engine stalls because the hot gas isn't tight in the cylinder. You want the flue liner to be sized appropriately to the appliance so the gas stays concentrated, hot, and moving fast.
The list also mentions shape, item 24, rectangular versus round flues.
Yeah, this is pure fluid dynamics. Smoke wants to move in a spiral. It naturally wants to corkscrew its way up the chimney. A round pipe is perfect for this. It also offers the least amount of surface area for the volume, which means less friction.
But most masonry chimneys use those rectangular clay tiles.
They do, because they are cheap and they're easy to stack. But the corners of a rectangle are just dead zones. They create eddies and turbulence. The smoke drags against those corners. It adds a ton of friction to the system. A round liner will always draft better than a square one of the same area. It's just physics.
Speaking of friction and turbulence, let's talk about the smoke chamber. That's items 7 and 8.
That's
First,
right.
just define the smoke chamber for us.
The smoke chamber is the funnel. It's that transitional space directly above the fireplace damper, but below where the flue tiles start. It's where the wide firebox has to taper down into the narrow chimney.
And the list warns against corbelled smoke chambers. What is corbelling?
Corbelling is stepping the brick. So instead of a nice smooth slope, the mason just lays the bricks like a staircase to narrow the opening. Step, step, step.
And I'm going to assume those steps are bad for airflow.
Terrible. Imagine pouring water down a jagged staircase versus a smooth slide. The steps create massive turbulence. The smoke hits the underside of each brick step and just rolls over. It creates drag. The list emphasizes that the smoke chamber should be parged.
It's art.
Parged smooth. You want to cover those steps with refractory mortar so it's a slick, aerodynamic ramp. You want the smoke to accelerate into the flue, not trip over a staircase on its way up.
It's amazing how much of this is just aerodynamics. It's not magic. It's just about minimizing resistance.
That's it. Maximize heat, minimize friction. That's the whole game.
Now, there is a section of the source that I found, frankly, a bit alarming. It's titled, "The House is a Vacuum," and it suggests that our modern homes are actively trying to kill our fireplaces.
This is the frontier of modern building failures. I'm not exaggerating. We are building houses that are essentially enemies of the chimney.
This is item 59, negative pressure from tight homes.
Okay, think about an old farmhouse built in 1900. The windows rattled, there were gaps under the doors, the walls were uninsulated.
It was drafty.
It was leaky. But from a physics standpoint, that leakage was a feature, not a bug. When the fire needed oxygen, the house easily sucked in fresh air through all those cracks to replace what went up the chimney.
But today,
Today, we build to passive house standards. We use Tyvek house wrap, spray foam insulation, triple pane windows, magnetic weather stripping. We seal the house up like a Ziploc bag.
so the fire tries to pull air.
And the house says no. The house is a vacuum. There is no replacement air available. And remember, the chimney draft is weak. If the chimney can't pull air into the house to replace what it's expelling, it cannot push smoke out. It's that simple.
And then, on top of that passive vacuum, you add the active competitors.
Yeah.
Items 61, 62, 63, the appliances.
This is the knockout punch. So you have a tight house. Now you turn on the kitchen range hood. Some of these professional-style Viking or Wolf hoods move 1,000 cubic feet of air per minute. CFM.
That's a lot of air.
A fireplace might only need 100 CFM to function properly. So you have a fan sucking 1,000 CFM out of the house. The house is sealed. It must find replacement air to balance the pressure. Where is the biggest hole in the house?
The chimney.
The chimney. So that massive kitchen fan literally overpowers the chimney's buoyancy. It reverses the flow. It sucks air down the chimney, through the firebox, across the burning logs, and into the kitchen.
So you're just frying some bacon, and suddenly your living room fills up with smoke.
It happens all the time. We call it flow reversal. The mechanical systems in modern homes, clothes dryers, bathroom fans, range hoods, are much, much stronger than the natural gravity draft of a fireplace. It's a tug of war, and the fans win every single time.
The list also mentions basements, specifically as a problem area. Item 65, basement installations. Why is the basement worse than the living room?
This relates to the stack effect of the house itself. Think of your whole house as one big chimney. Warm air rises to the second floor and leaks out the attic. This creates high pressure at the top of the house and low pressure suction down in the basement.
So the basement is the air intake for the house chimney.
Correct. So if you put a wood stove in the basement, you are putting it in the lowest pressure zone of the entire home. The house is naturally trying to suck air in at the basement level. Your chimney is trying to push air out. They are fighting each other directly. It is physically the hardest place in a house to establish a draft.
So if you have a basement stove in a tight house with a big kitchen fan, good luck.
You're going to get smoked out unless you provide something called make-up air.
Which is what?
It's a dedicated pipe that brings fresh air from the outside directly to the stove. You have to bypass the house's pressure struggles and give the stove its own breathing tube.
That makes total sense. You're basically isolating the engine from the house vacuum.
Exactly. You give it its own air supply so it doesn't have to fight.
Okay, let's shift gears to the final variable. We've blamed the wind, the builder, the architect, and the appliances. Now we have to look in the mirror. Section 6. User error.
The net behind the wheel factor. Yes.
Item 38 on the list is probably the most common one I hear about. Wet or green firewood?
Oh, it's tragic. People spend thousands on a stove, thousands on a chimney, and then they just throw soggy wood into it.
Why does wet wood kill the draft? I mean, I know it burns poorly and it hisses and all that, but why does it affect the airflow physics?
It's all about temperature. Remember, heat is the engine. When you burn wood that has, say, 40% moisture content, the fire has to use a massive amount of its energy just to boil that water into steam.
It's basic thermodynamics, that phase change energy.
Exactly. It takes a ton of energy to turn water to steam. That energy is not heating the gas, it's just boiling water. So your combustion gases end up being cool and filled with steam.
And cool gas means no buoyancy.
No buoyancy means the smoke just lingers. And that steam. As it travels up the chimney, it cools and turns back into water, mixing with the soot to form glazed creosote. It's sticky, tar-like, and highly, highly flammable. Wet wood doesn't just ruin your evening. It actively ruins your chimney.
So how can a listener know if their wood is dry? Do you just look at it?
Don't guess. You really can't tell just by looking at the bark. Buy a moisture meter. They're $20 at any hardware store. Split a log, stick the pins in the fresh face. If it's over 20%, don't burn it.
Simple enough. Another operational error on the list is item 41, not preheating the flue. We sort of touched on this with the cold plug idea.
This is absolutely crucial for those exterior chimneys we talked about. People just light the kindling, shut the door, and walk away. The little flame produces this tiny trickle of smoke that just hits the cold plug and backs right up.
So what's the protocol? How do you actually push the plug out?
You have to prime the pump, roll up a newspaper into a torch, or you can use a starter gel. Light it. Hold it high up in the firebox, right near the open damper. You are physically sending a big blast of hot air up the pipe to displace that heavy cold air. You hold it there until you hear the roar, that sound of the air just sucking up.
It actually roars.
Oh, it does. It sounds like a little jet engine starting up. Once you hear that whoosh, you know the draft is established. Then you light the fire. You have to verify the engine is turning before you dump the fuel in.
That's a great tip. What about air control? Item 42. Closing air controls too early.
This is the classic overnighter mistake. People want the fire to last all night, so they load it up and immediately shut the air intake down to a bare trickle.
They want to bank the fire.
Right. But if you do that before the chimney is fully heated up, you starve the fire. It just smolders, the temperature plummets, the draft weakens. You wake up to a black glass door and a chimney that's just caked with creosote. You have to let the fire roar for 20 or 30 minutes, get the brick hot, get the draft pulling hard. Only then can you start to dial it back.
Finally, we have to talk about maintenance, or the lack of it. The list is kind of a horror show of nature reclaiming the chimney. Items 87 through 90.
The critters.
Birds, girls, raccoons.
A chimney swift nest can completely, 100% block a flue. I've seen it. Someone lights the first fire of the season, and the smoke has literally zero path of escape. It comes 100% back into the house. It's an incredibly dangerous situation.
And even without animals, there's the cap and crown. Items 81 and 82. Leaks.
Water is the enemy of masonry. We know that. But specifically for draft, a wet chimney is a cold chimney. As the water evaporates out of the brick, it cools the masonry down.
Evaporative cooling, like sweat.
Exactly. A waterlogged chimney acts like a little swamp cooler. It will struggle to hold heat, which means it will struggle to draft.
So cap your chimney.
Cap it, crown it, keep the water out. It's that important.
As we wrap up this deep dive into the 100 factors, I'm just struck by how interconnected this all is. We started with what I thought was a brick pipe, and we ended up with this complex system involving fluid dynamics, thermodynamics, meteorology, building science.
It is a system. That's the takeaway. You can't just look at one part. You can have the perfect chimney height, but if your wood is wet, it fails. You can have dry wood, but if your house is too tight, it fails. You can have a loose house, but if a tree outside is creating a wind shadow, it fails.
It's a chain with 100 links, and if just one of them breaks, the smoke is in your living room.
That's right. When a fireplace smokes, it is rarely a mystery. It's not a ghost. It is a physics equation that isn't balancing. And usually it's just the cold air winning the tug of war against the hot air. Your job as the user is to help the hot air win.
And that brings me to a final thought for you, for the listeners. We talked about how modern homes are almost hostile to natural draft. Passive houses, tight envelopes. As we look forward, are we designing the traditional fireplace out of existence?
You know, I think we are. The era of the open hearth relying solely on gravity to move smoke is ending. In a modern, high-performance home, you simply cannot rely on buoyancy alone. It's not strong enough. We are seeing a huge shift toward sealed combustion units, direct vent fireplaces, and mechanically assisted draft fans.
So the future isn't magic. It's engineering.
It's definitely engineering. If you want fire in a modern home, you have to respect the physics. You can't just poke a hole in the roof anymore.
Well, there you have it. The invisible engine in your living room, demystified. Next time you strike a match, take a second to appreciate the 100 things that have to go right for that smoke to disappear.
It's a small miracle every time it works.
Like, thanks for guiding us through the list. I mean, it's all about structural defects and airflow dynamics. We are going to completely dismantle that idea. It turns out that simple tube is actually a complex, highly sensitive engine. And I don't use that word lightly.
It really is an engine. That is the only way to think about it if you want it to work. It's a thermal engine, and it's driven by physics, specifically heat, buoyancy, and aerodynamics.
And like any engine, if the parts are misaligned, even by a fraction, it stalls.
It stalls. And when a chimney stalls, it's not like a car where you just pull over.
No, we're talking about smoke filling your living room or weird cold drafts that seem to come from absolutely nowhere.
Or that fire that just will not stay lit no matter what you do.
Exactly. And people usually blame the wood or they think, oh, I'm just bad at building fires.
Right, user error. But the reality is often hidden deep inside the masonry. So today, that's what we're going to do. We're going to decode the structural anatomy of a chimney system. We're not looking at bricks, we're looking at airflow.
So our mission is to take this system apart, piece by piece, from the top of the flue all the way down to the firebox, and figure out why these draft failures happen.
And we've got data on everything from offset geometries to the specific mathematical ratios of your fireplace opening. It's surprisingly precise.
It is. I was honestly amazed at how much math goes into just having a cozy evening by the fire.
So let's unpack this. Where do we even start? I think we have to start with that fundamental concept you mentioned, the straw. The source material makes this really compelling analogy between a chimney flue and a simple drinking straw.
Okay, I can visualize that. But a straw relies on me, sucking on one end. A chimney doesn't have a vacuum pump on the roof.
In a way, it does. But the vacuum is created by heat. So think about how a straw works. It needs a continuous sealed pathway to maintain a pressure difference.
Right. Low pressure in my mouth, high pressure outside, pushes the liquid up.
Exactly. Now, if you're drinking a soda and there's a tiny crack in that straw, a little pinhole halfway up, what happens?
Oh, it's the worst. You get air bubbles. You suck, but the liquid just doesn't come up. The whole system fails.
The pressure difference collapses. A chimney works on that exact same principle. But instead of your lungs, the engine is the buoyancy of hot gases. You need a consistent column of warm air rising straight up. The heat makes the air lighter, and the heavier outside air pushes it up. That's your suction.
Straight up and warm seem to be the key words here. It sounds like any deviation from that just kills the engine.
It does. The goal in fluid dynamics, which is really what this is something called laminar flow.
Laminar flow. Okay, that sounds like something from a NASA briefing. Can you break that down for us?
Sure. Just imagine a river flowing very, very gently. The water is moving in these smooth, parallel layers. There's no splashing, no swirling, no white water.
Okay, just a calm, smooth flow.
That's laminar flow. And that's what we want smoke to do. We want it to just slide up the chimney in a straight line with the absolute minimum resistance.
As opposed to turbulent flow, which would be like whitewater rapids.
Exactly. Rapids, eddies, swirling chaos. Turbulence kills draft because it slows the smoke down. And structurally, there are so many ways to break that laminar flow. One of the most common issues in the research is defects in the flue tiles themselves.
And these are the terracotta clay liners inside the brick shell, right?
Yes. In a masonry chimney, you have these 2-foot sections of clay pipe stacked on top of each other. They form the inner skin. Now imagine if there are gaps between those tiles, where the mortar has fallen out or was maybe never put in right.
So the straw has a hole.
The straw has a leak. And in a chimney, a leak is catastrophic for 2 big reasons. First, you lose that suction column we just talked about.
Right, the pressure equalizes.
But second, and this is critical, you have something called thermal bleed.
Thermal bleed. That sounds bad.
It is. If there's a gap, the heat from the smoke just escapes into the surrounding masonry or into the air cavity between the liner and the brick.
And we just established that heat is the engine.
Heat is the fuel. If the smoke loses its heat, it loses its buoyancy. Cooler gas is heavier gas, and heavier gas wants to sink.
So it just stops rising.
Or worse, it starts falling.
Right.
But it gets worse than that. Those gaps also allow cold air from, say, the attic or just from outside to leak in.
Oh, wow. So you're cooling the smoke from both directions.
Yes. You're losing heat out and sucking cold air in.
So a crack isn't just a structural flaw, it's like a refrigeration unit. You're actively sabotaging the buoyancy.
That's a perfect way to put it. Okay. We're going to hit pause on your training session for just a minute. I know you're probably deep in the weeds of, a Flue liner tutorial or something. But we really need to talk about who is actually producing all of this content.
Right. If you're here watching these videos, you're already getting the benefit of the training. But there's a much bigger ecosystem behind this YouTube channel. We're looking at chimneysweeps.com, and it's pretty clear this isn't just a media company. It's more like a funnel, a vetting engine for the industry.
That's a really important distinction, because usually with these online directories, you just pay a fee, you get your pin on a map. Is that what's happening here? Is this just another pay-to-play model?
No. The documentation we have suggests it's the opposite. It seems like they're trying to solve that classic low-bidder problem that plagues the trades. They're not looking for advertisers. They're building a vetted network. And that standard, it seems to come directly from the founder, Ray Gessner.
I was looking at his bio. You don't often see this kind of background. It's this mix of high-level academic engineering and, actual trade mastery. You usually get the guy in the office or the guy in the truck.
Exactly. And that combination is really the key here. Ray isn't just some tech guy. He has a master's degree in civil engineering. He's a licensed professional engineer, a PE in multiple states.
But he also holds master licenses, HVAC, gas fitter, plumber.
And he's a certified home inspector through NACI.
So he's looking at a chimney as both a structural engineer and as a hands-on inspector. But how does that actually translate to the platform? Is it just good branding?
It seems to be baked right into the gatekeeping. Because he understands the physics, the code, the actual science behind it, the platform can enforce a technical standard that, a simple lead gen site just couldn't. Which brings us to their whole gold standard vetting process.
Okay, right. So for the professionals listening right now, the ones who are already doing great work, how does the platform actually verify that? How do they filter out the noise?
Well, it starts with the basics, the non-negotiables. You have to have the proper licensing, general liability insurance, workers' comp, all of that.
The table stakes.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But the real barrier to entry is the CCI exam, the Certified Chimney Inspector Test.
And this isn't just one of those watch a video and click a button certifications.
Oh, far from it. Ray Gessner developed this exam himself to test for technical accuracy, safety knowledge. It's designed to be difficult. It's a filter, plain and simple. It ensures that if a homeowner finds you through them, they're not just getting a name from a list. They're getting someone who passed a really tough technical evaluation.
Okay, so let's say a listener runs that gauntlet. They've got the insurance, they study, they pass the CCI exam, they're in. What's the actual utility for them? Why jump through all those hoops instead of, say, just buying more Google ads?
Because it shifts you from just being listed somewhere to being part of an operational support system. The sources show a few key benefits. First, there's the proprietary inspection report software.
Which I'm guessing is based on those same engineering standards we were just talking about.
Precisely. It automates the reporting, so your paperwork has the same rigor as the inspection itself. Then there's the community. You get access to these monthly online forums, mentorship, networking. It's like a mastermind group for ethical operators.
And that brings us to getting the actual clients. Let's talk about the number 833-CHIMNEY.
That's the engine. The website, that phone number, they drive homeowners who are specifically looking for qualified professionals. These are not people just shopping for the cheapest price. They're looking for vetted expertise for big jobs, relining, structural engineering inspections.
So it creates this kind of feedback loop. You watch the free training, like the video you're probably watching right now, to get better at your job. Then you pass the exam to prove you're good. And then the platform sends you customers who actually value and are willing to pay for that expertise.
It helps the good guys build stronger businesses because they finally stop competing with the companies that are just cutting corners. It really elevates the trade.
So I guess here's the challenge for everyone listening. You are sitting here right now. You're learning for free from one of the best sources in the world. But the real question is, are you ready to capitalize on it? Are you good enough to pass that CCI exam, to join the network, and be recognized as one of the best?
If you think you're operating at that level, head over to the site. Click Join Us.
All right, we'll let you get back to your training now. Thanks for listening. Now, the sources also talk about alignment. What happens if those clay tiles aren't stacked perfectly straight?
I would guess it's like bad plumbing. Things get stuck.
It's worse than getting stuck. It changes the aerodynamics. If a tile shifts, even by a tiny amount, say an eighth of an inch, it creates an internal ledge, a lip.
Like a little speed bump inside the chimney.
Exactly. And aerodynamics hates ledges. When that column of rising smoke hits that little lip, it can't just slide past. It hits the edge, it curls back on itself, and it swirls.
Ah, there's your turbulence.
That's the turbulence. Instead of that smooth laminar flow, you get this chaotic tumbling air. And that tumbling acts like a brake.
So it slows the velocity of the smoke going up.
It slows the upward velocity, and because the smoke is swirling around, it spends more time touching the cooler walls of the flue. So turbulence doesn't just slow the smoke, it actively cools it down. It's a double whammy.
There was one other defect in this section that really stood out to me because it just seemed so minor, but apparently it's a huge deal. Mortar fins.
Ah, yes. In the trade, they sometimes call this snot.
Lovely. A very technical term.
It's descriptive, though. When a mason is laying those flue tiles, they use mortar to seal the joints. If they aren't careful, or if they don't reach down and smooth the inside of the joint, that wet mortar squishes out into the airflow path.
Okay.
And then it hardens into these little fins or tongues sticking out into the flue.
And I'm guessing that does the exact same thing as the misaligned tile.
Exactly. It increases the drag coefficient of the flue. It creates friction. It's like trying to drive a sports car on a road covered in little speed bumps versus a brand new highway. The smoke hits those fins, it trips over them, creates eddies, and it loses momentum.
And there's a really nasty side effect to all these things, the gaps, the ledges, the fins, that goes beyond just the airflow, right? They become traps.
That's right. They catch solids, soot, and creosote. If the surface isn't perfectly smooth, that flammable gunk builds up in the spots you can't clean properly.
So not only do you have bad airflow, but you're literally building up fuel for a chimney fire in the exact spots where the structural integrity is already compromised.
And it just gets worse. That buildup further narrows the flue, which increases the friction even more. It's a compounding cycle of failure. One defect leads to buildup, which leads to more drag, which leads to more cooling, which leads to more buildup.
That's a perfect transition, actually, because we're talking about things that disrupt flow. We just discussed accidental disruptions, cracks, sloppy mortar. But sometimes the disruption is built in on purpose. I want to talk about the offset.
The offset chimney. This is where the physics of the bend really comes into play.
Okay, so for anyone listening, let's visualize this. We're talking about a chimney that doesn't go straight up from the fireplace to the roof.
Right. It might go up 6 feet, then angle to the left to get around a bedroom or a closet on the second floor, and then angle back before it goes up again.
Architects love them, I guess.
They do, because it solves floor plan problems. Oh, the fireplace is here, but the roof ridge is over there. No problem, we'll just bend the chimney. But physically, it's a major, major penalty for the draft engine.
The sources were pretty harsh on offsets. They basically said if you can avoid them, you absolutely should. Why is a bend so costly for the system?
It all goes back to momentum vectors. Smoke has mass. It wants to rise vertically. That's its natural state. When you force it to turn, say, 30 degrees to the left, you are forcing it to work against its own momentum. The gases have to physically slow down to navigate that turn.
It's like taking a sharp corner in a car. You can't do it at full speed. You have to brake.
Exactly. And when you hit the brakes, you create turbulence. The smoke creates friction against the sidewalls of that bend. And remember what happens with friction.
The gas lingers. And as we've established, lingering means cooling.
You're getting it. The longer that smoke touches the masonry, the more heat it loses. So, by the time the smoke gets through that bend and starts heading up again, it's significantly cooler and slower than it was before the bend. It has lost a ton of energy.
And the sources mentioned this effect isn't just linear, it's compound. Like having two bends is way, way worse than having one.
It's exponential. One offset might be manageable if the rest of the system is absolutely perfect. But if you have a zigzag chimney left, then right, then up, you are just hammering that draft strength. And this leads to a loss of what we call effective height.
Effective height. Okay, unpack that for us, because height matters, right? A tall chimney is a good chimney.
Height is everything. The pressure differential depends on height. So imagine you have a 30-foot tall chimney. Physically, if you take out a tape measure, it's 30 feet of pipe.
Okay.
But because of all the friction and the drag from those offsets, it might only draft with the strength of a 20-foot chimney.
Wow. So you're paying for 30 feet of masonry, but you're only getting 20 feet of performance out of it.
Precisely. You've introduced so much resistance that the engine just acts like a much smaller, weaker engine. And in a draft-dependent system, if you cripple that effective height with bends, you might not have enough power left to pull the smoke out of the firebox.
There's also a safety aspect to these bends that really creep me out. The inside shoulder.
Yes, this is a critical point for anyone with an older home or an offset system.
It sounds like a wrestling move,
Yeah.
but it's actually a place where the flow just dies.
So picture the bend again. The smoke is flowing up and has to turn. The gas on the outside of the turn moves faster, like a race car taking the outside line to maintain its speed.
Right.
But on the inside corner of that bend, the air becomes stagnant. It slows down almost to a complete stop.
A dead zone.
A total dead zone.
Yeah.
And in that dead zone, the smoke cools instantly. When wood smoke cools, it condenses into creosote, that sticky, flammable tar. So the inside shoulder of an offset is the #1 spot for dangerous, flammable creosote buildup.
And I imagine it's a nightmare to clean.
That's the practical problem. A chimney sweep pushes a brush down from the top. That brush is on a semi-rigid rod. It has a really hard time navigating a sharp bend.
It probably just skips right over that inside corner.
It usually does. So you often end up with a chimney that's been cleaned, but that specific danger zone is still packed with flammable fuel.
Which is a ticking time bomb. You think you're safe, but the most dangerous part was completely missed.
It is. And for gas appliances, it's a different risk, but still bad. Instead of creosote, you get acidic moisture condensing in that cool bend, and that can rot out an aluminum liner or dissolve the mortar joints over time.
So the takeaway here is physics really favors the straight line.
Always. The NFPA, that's the National Fire Protection Association, they recommend offsets be no more than 30 degrees from vertical. Anything sharper than that, and you are just asking for chronic failure.
Okay, so we've looked at the tube, the straw, and we've looked at the bends. Now I want to move down to the transition point, the funnel. The sources call this the smoke chamber.
The throat of the system.
Right. So structurally, this is the area between the firebox where the fire actually is and the flue liner. It's shaped like an upside-down funnel.
And it has a very difficult job. I mean, think about the volume difference. It has to take this wide, lazy cloud of smoke from the firebox and compress it, accelerate it, and squeeze it into a relatively small hole, the flue.
It's like the merging lane on a busy highway.
Mm.
You have traffic coming in 5 lanes wide, and it has to zipper down into one.
That's a great analogy. And just like a merging lane, if the construction is bad, you get a traffic jam.
The sources highlighted a specific defect here called stair-stepping. This sounds like something I've seen in old, exposed brick fireplaces.
It's very common in older masonry. To create that funnel shape, the mason would just lay each course of brick a little further in than the last one. This is called corbelling.
So instead of a smooth ramp for the smoke, you end up with these jagged, step-like edges inside the chamber.
Exactly. And thinking back to our laminar flow discussion, what do steps do to airflow?
Turbulent city.
Absolute turbulence. The smoke hits those steps, it swirls, it creates eddies, it gets stuck in the corners. Instead of accelerating into the flue, it hits a wall of resistance. This is why so many old fireplaces smoke into the room. The smoke physically can't merge fast enough. It backs up.
And the fix for this has a specific name, right? It was parging.
Yes. Parging. It sounds like a made-up word, but it's crucial. It means coating those rough, stepped bricks with a smooth layer of refractory mortar. You are effectively sculpting a smooth, streamlined funnel over the rough bricks.
So you're turning the stairs into a slide.
Exactly what you're doing. You want the smoke to slide effortlessly into the flue. The building code actually requires this now. If you look up a chimney with a flashlight and you see rough, exposed brick steps in the smoke chamber, that is technically a defect. It needs to be parged smooth.
There was another number that popped up in this section, the 8-inch rule. This is about wall thickness. Why does the thickness of the smoke chamber wall matter so much?
Because the smoke chamber is the hottest part of the entire chimney system. It's taking the direct radiant heat from the fire. If those walls are thin, say just one layer of brick, maybe 4 inches, that heat conducts right through them to the outside air, or worse, the wood framing of the house.
And we know what happens when we lose heat from the smoke.
The smoke cools down, gets heavy, and drops back into the room. You need at least 8 inches of solid masonry to act as a thermal mass. You want to keep that heat inside the system to keep the engine running hot. You want the chamber to absorb heat and hold it, not bleed it out.
It's interesting how every single component we discuss comes back to keep it hot, keep it smooth.
That is the mantra. If you violate either of those, you lose draft. It's that simple.
But there's also a geometry issue here. Can a smoke chamber be too tall?
It can. If the chamber is extremely tall, the smoke has to travel a really long distance before it even enters the flue. That's just more time to cool down. It loses velocity.
It's too short.
Too short, or the angle is too flat, you create a bottleneck. The smoke just hits the roof of the chamber and chokes.
So it's a Goldilocks situation. Not too tall, not too short.
And importantly, it has to be centered. If the smoke chamber doesn't align perfectly with the flue liner, you have unsupported tiles and gaps. We've seen cases where the liner is just balancing on the edge of the brick, leaving a gap where fire can get into the walls. That's a house fire waiting to happen.
Yikes. Okay, let's go deeper. Literally, below the smoke chamber, there is a part of the chimney that I honestly didn't know existed until I read these sources. The smoke shelf.
The hidden hero of the fireplace.
I love that title, The Hidden Hero. Where exactly is this thing?
So if you are standing in your living room looking into a fireplace, it's behind the damper, hidden by the back wall of the firebox. You cannot see it from the room.
And what is its job? Is it just a shelf?
It is a horizontal shelf, yes, but its function is pure aerodynamics. It serves two main purposes. The first is wind defense.
Wind defense. Like stopping wind from coming down the chimney.
Exactly. Imagine a cold, windy night. A gust of wind blows across the top of your chimney, and a plug of cold air gets forced down the flue.
The dreaded downdraft.
Right. If you didn't have a smoke shelf, that cold air would shoot straight down into the firebox and blow smoke right into your face. But the smoke shelf acts as a shield, or a deflector. The cold air comes down, it hits the shelf, and it swirls.
It bounces off.
It creates a turbulence zone, or a rolling eddy, right on the shelf. That swirling air breaks the momentum of the downdraft. It dissipates the energy, allowing the hot smoke coming up from the fire to just bypass it and keep on rising. It's like a buffer zone.
That is incredibly clever engineering for a pile of bricks. It uses the bad air to block the bad air.
It is. It's passive aerodynamics at its best. But there is a downside to having a flat shelf inside a chimney.
I can guess. Gravity. Things fall on it.
Everything falls on it. Because it's a flat surface hidden from view, it catches all the debris. Broken pieces of flue tile, crumbling mortar, leaves, twigs.
And the source has got a little graphic here.
Yes, biology. Dead animals. Birds, squirrels, raccoons. If they fall down the chimney, they land on the smoke shelf.
And besides the obvious horror of that, what does a pile of debris do to the airflow?
It ruins that carefully designed turbulence zone. If you have a pile of leaves or a raccoon skeleton on the shelf, the air can't swirl properly. It creates chaotic turbulence. The smoke hits the debris, it slows down, and it spills into the room.
So if your fireplace suddenly starts smoking after years of working perfectly fine, it might be.
It might be a full shelf. It's a very, very common cause of sudden draft failure. You need to get in there and vacuum it out.
There was one more detail about the smoke shelf that fascinated me. The cold pocket.
This is a construction defect. In a good chimney, the area behind the smoke shelf, that space between the back of the firebox and the exterior wall, should be filled solid with masonry.
Okay.
But lazy masons sometimes leave it hollow.
Just empty space behind the bricks.
Right. It saves them time and material. But that empty space acts as a thermal sink. It stays cold. So you have this cold, hollow cave right next to where your hot smoke is trying to rise. It sucks the heat right out of the smoke through the brick. Host. It's another one of these refrigeration units built into your heater. Essentially, yes. The shelf area should be filled solid with heat-resistant grout to hold the heat. If it's hollow, you're fighting an uphill battle against thermodynamics from the start.
Okay, we are arriving at the bottom of the stack. The engine room itself, the firebox.
The heart of the operation.
This is where the fire lives. And the sources point out that the firebox isn't just a container for wood. It has to have thermal integrity.
That's a key concept. Fire bricks, those yellowish bricks you see inside the fireplace, they're special. They aren't just there to not melt. They're designed to reflect heat. They literally bounce the heat back into the fire to make it burn hotter.
So if you have a missing brick or a big crack in the mortar,
you are breaking the mirror. Instead of reflecting heat, the masonry behind that missing brick absorbs it. It sucks the heat away from the fire.
And again, cooler fire means cooler smoke, which means no draft.
It's the domino effect. A damaged firebox creates a cooler fire. That cooler fire produces smoke that is heavier. That heavy smoke struggles to get through the smoke chamber. The entire system becomes sluggish.
And cracks can also let air in from behind. Right?
Yes. If you have cracks in the back wall, you might be sucking in cold air from a wall cavity or from a crawl space. So now you're actively mixing cold air into your fire. It's like trying to boil water while pouring ice cubes into the pot.
Not very efficient.
Not at all.
Now, here is where it gets really interesting for me. The math. The sources talk about the fireplace opening ratio. I had no idea that the size of the hole in my wall had to be mathematically married to the size of the flea liner way up on the roof.
They are a matched pair. You cannot separate them. The rule of thumb, and this is in the building codes, is based on area. If you have a square or rectangular flue, the area of that flue must be at least 1/10 the area of the fireplace opening.
And for a round flue.
It's slightly different, usually 1/12, because round pipes are just more efficient aerodynamically, but sticking with that 110th rule is the safest bet.
So let's play out the scenarios to see why this matters. What happens if I have a giant fireplace opening? Huge, grand, walk-in style, but a standard size flue.
This is scenario A, the overwhelm. The firebox acts like a giant mouth. It gulps in a massive amount of air from the room because the opening is so big.
Okay, so lots of air going in.
But the straw, the flue, is too skinny. It physically cannot swallow that volume of air and smoke.
So it chokes.
It chokes. The smoke backs up and spills out the top of the fireplace right into your room. The flue is completely overwhelmed. Plus, all that extra room air that the fire didn't even use for combustion just mixes in and cools the smoke down, which kills the buoyancy.
Okay, so that's bad. What about the opposite? A tiny fireplace opening, but a big, giant flue.
That's scenario B, the starvation. A small opening restricts the amount of air getting to the fire.
So the fire can't breathe properly.
Right. It burns cool and slow, it smolders, and because the opening is so small, it acts like a bottleneck. Even though the flue is huge and ready to work, the smoke can't get into the chimney fast enough to keep that column of air warm.
It creates a traffic jam at the entrance.
Exactly. And because the flow velocity is so slow in that giant flue, the whole system becomes hypersensitive. If someone opens a door in the house or the wind shifts, the draft just collapses because there isn't enough momentum to resist it.
It's unstable.
Highly unstable. You need that perfect Goldilocks ratio to get the velocity just right. Not too fast, not too slow.
It's amazing, isn't it? We've gone from the top to the bottom, and at every single stage, the flue, the offset, the chamber, the shelf, the firebox, the message is the same. It's a system.
That is the synthesis. You can't just fix one part and expect miracles. If you have a perfect flue but a shattered firebox, it won't draft. If you have a perfect firebox but a jagged, unparged smoke chamber, it won't draft. The firebox, the shelf, the chamber, and the flue must all work in harmony to maintain two things: heat and velocity.
That's really the aha moment for me today. I used to think draft was something a chimney has.
Yeah.
You know, like, oh, this chimney has good draft.
Right. Like it's a static property of the bricks themselves.
Exactly. But it's not. Draft is something the chimney does. It's an active process. It's work. The chimney is fighting friction and cold air every single inch of the way.
That's a beautiful way to put it. It is a constant battle against physics. And the chimney's only weapon is heat.
And straight lines.
And straight lines. If you take one thing away from this deep dive, let it be that. When in doubt, physics favors the vertical. The most reliable solution is always the straightest path.
It makes you look at those charming, winding old chimneys a little differently, doesn't it?
It certainly does. I see them now and I just think, turbulence.
Before we wrap up, I want to leave our listeners with a thought that came to me while reading the very end of the source packet. We've been talking about the chimney as an engine that needs air. It relies on pulling air from the house to feed the fire.
Right. It needs oxygen for combustion, and it needs air to carry the smoke up.
But think about modern houses. We build them to be airtight now. Triple-pane windows, sealed doors, Tyvek vapor barriers.
We wrap them in plastic. We seal every gap to save energy.
Exactly. So if our chimneys are these ancient engines designed to suck air freely from the room, and we now live in sealed plastic boxes, where is that air supposed to come from? Are our modern homes effectively strangling this ancient technology?
That is a very, very big question. The house itself starts to act like a vacuum pulling against the chimney. And I suspect the answer is yes. The tighter the house, the harder that chimney has to work.
Something to think about the next time you light a fire and it seems to struggle. It might not be the wood, it might be the house itself. We're going to decode the physics of draft. We want to understand why one fireplace roars beautifully on a cold night and another one just sort of coughs smoke back into your living room. And the crazy thing is, it's not magic.
No, it's not luck.
It's math.
It's thermodynamics, pure and simple.
So let's establish the ground rules here. There is one core concept that drives every single thing we're going to talk about today. The sources call it the delta T, or temperature differential.
Right. This is the heartbeat of the whole system. I think people assume there's, I don't know, a fan inside the chimney or that the wind is somehow pulling the smoke out. But draft, that invisible force that's moving all the air, it's created entirely by the difference in temperature.
So the difference between the hot gases inside the flue and the cold air outside.
That's it. It's the hot air rises principle, but on steroids.
Okay, right.
Exactly. Hot air is less dense, it's buoyant, it wants to float on top of that cold, dense outside air. The greater the difference between the temperature inside the chimney and the temperature outside, the stronger that engine runs.
So the mantra for today is essentially, heat is the fuel.
Heat is the fuel.
Yeah.
That is the perfect way to frame it. I mean, every design choice we're about to discuss, from insulation to the size of the pipe to the wood you burn, it all serves one master: keep the heat inside the chimney.
If you keep the heat, you keep the draft.
And if you lose the heat, the engine stalls. Simple as that.
Okay, so we've got a roadmap. We're going to look at the structure first, insulation and walls. Then we're going to tackle what you call the Goldilocks problem of sizing the liner. Then we'll get into some invisible aerodynamics with the throat of the fireplace. And finally, we're going to turn the mirror on the listener and talk about user error, because apparently we're the ones ruining the draft half the time.
We usually are. The chimney is the engine, but we're the drivers.
Let's jump into section 1, the fortress of heat. I want to start with a phenomenon that explains why so many people struggle to just start a fire. The sources describe something called the cold air plug. This sounds like a villain in a plumbing commercial, but explain the physics here.
Well, it feels like a villain when you're kneeling on the hearth with a match burning your fingers. So imagine your chimney has been sitting cold all night, or maybe for a week. That flue, it isn't empty.
Right.
It is filled with a column of air. And because that chimney is surrounded by cold masonry, that column of air is heavy. It's dense. It has settled like a stone at the bottom of the flue.
So it's a physical blockage.
Essentially, yes, it's a pressure cap. When you light a match or a piece of newspaper, you're producing this tiny, tiny amount of hot gas. That little bit of hot gas tries to rise, but it hits this massive column of heavy, cold air sitting on top of it. It just doesn't have the energy to push that plug out of the way.
So it just bounces back.
It bounces back. The smoke has nowhere to go but into your living room. And this is where the construction of the chimney becomes so critical. The sources really highlight the difference between a raw masonry chimney, just bricks, and one with an insulated liner.
Why does the material matter so much if the air is cold in both of them? I don't quite get that.
Yeah, it's about thermal mass. Bricks and mortar are heavy. They are heat sinks. They absolutely love to absorb energy. So if you try to light a fire in an uninsulated masonry chimney, the bricks immediately start to steal the heat from that initial flame. They just suck the energy right out of the gas.
So the gas stays cold, the plug stays heavy, and you're just sitting there coughing in a smoke cloud.
Precisely. Now, contrast that with an insulated system. Maybe you have a stainless steel liner that's wrapped in, say, mineral wool insulation.
Like a thermos.
Exactly like a thermos. It's the perfect analogy. When you light that first bit of kindling, the insulation prevents the masonry from stealing the heat. The air inside that liner warms up almost instantly because the container isn't absorbing all the energy.
Right.
The gas stays hot, it becomes buoyant, and Poppet has enough force to push that cold air plug right out the top.
So it's really about reaction time. The insulated liner just reaches operating temperature much, much faster.
So much faster. And it maintains it. As the gases rise up the chimney, they naturally want to cool down. An insulated liner keeps them hot. And hotter gases mean they stay lighter and move faster. It's a self-reinforcing cycle.
The faster they move, the less time they have to cool down.
Exactly.
This reminds me of trying to boil water. Like if you use a thick cast iron pot versus a thin camping kettle, the cast iron takes forever to heat up because the metal itself is eating all the energy first.
That is a brilliant analogy. It's perfect. The uninsulated chimney is the cast iron pot. You have to saturate the bricks with heat before they stop stealing it from the smoke. By the time that happens, your whole house might already smell like a campfire.
And the insulated liner is the thin kettle.
It's the thin kettle. It transfers the energy to the water, or in this case, it keeps the energy in the smoke, almost immediately.
There's another structural element mentioned here called parging the smoke chamber. Now, I actually had to look up what a smoke chamber even is. It's that area right above the firebox, but below the actual chimney flue, right? Kind of like a funnel.
Correct. It's the transition zone. It takes the wide exhaust from the fire and funnels it down into the narrower chimney flue. And in a lot of older fireplaces, if you stick your head in there with a flashlight, which I recommend doing when there's no fire, obviously,
Of course.
you'll see exposed brick that looks like upside down stairs. It's all jagged.
And jagged is bad for airflow, I'm guessing.
It's terrible for airflow. Those steps, they create turbulence. So instead of the smoke flowing smoothly up, it hits those corners and it eddies. It spins around. That slows it down. But even worse, those jagged bricks act like cooling fins on a motorcycle engine.
Oh, wow.
They massively increase the surface area.
Which means more heat loss.
Exactly. They absorb heat aggressively. So just as your smoke is trying to gain speed to shoot up the flue, these cold, jagged bricks are stealing its thermal energy and physically tripping it up at the same time.
So parging is just smoothing it out, like plastering it.
It's exactly like plastering a wall. You're smoothing it out with a refractory mortar. You cover those steps to create a smooth, tapered slope. And you're doing two things. You're streamlining the aerodynamics so the smoke glides instead of tumbling. And you're adding an insulating layer that stops the brick from stealing so much heat.
You're effectively greasing the wheels for the smoke.
You really are.
It really does seem like every single design choice is a battle against heat loss. This brings us to the wall thickness debate. The sources reference a 4-inch versus 8-inch rule. I assume this refers to the thickness of the chimney walls.
Yes, and this is crucial, especially for chimneys built on the outside of a house. If you have a chimney running up the side of your home, it's exposed to freezing winter air on 3 sides. It is being constantly assaulted by the cold.
It's like a radiator in reverse.
That's a great way to put it. Now, if that chimney only has 4 inches of masonry, which was the code minimum for a long, long time, the cold penetrates that brick very quickly. It chills the flue gases. But if you have 8 inches of masonry or, distinct layers of brick and block, you are building a thermal buffer.
It's a shield.
It is. It takes much longer for the cold to penetrate 8 inches of mass. It protects the core temperature of the flue. And that's why you'll see the best chimney masons going way above the minimum code requirements. They aren't just building a wall so it doesn't fall down.
They're building a container for heat.
They're building a container for heat. And this connects right back to that delta T concept, right? If the outside cold penetrates the wall, it lowers the temperature inside the flue, that reduces the differential, and that kills the draft.
You're fighting a war on 2 fronts. You're trying to generate heat with the fire, and you're trying to defend that heat against the winter air outside.
And thick walls and insulation are your defensive line.
Okay, so we've built our fortress. We have insulation. We have smooth transitions. We have thick walls. Now we have to plumb it. Section 2 is about sizing the liner, and the outline calls this the Goldilocks principle.
This is where that engine metaphor really shines. You have to match the exhaust capacity to the engine's output. And in this case, the liner size, that determines the capacity.
Now, I think the intuitive assumption for most homeowners, and I'll include myself in this, is bigger is better. If I want good flow, give me a giant pipe. I don't want any restrictions. Why is that wrong?
It is intuitive, but in fluid dynamics, it's just dead wrong. Let's look at scenario A. The oversized liner. Imagine you have a modest wood stove, and you hook it up to a massive, cavernous masonry chimney that was built for a huge open fireplace.
The smoke has plenty of room to move.
Way too much room. As the smoke exits the stove, it enters this giant space, and what happens to a gas when it expands?
It cools down.
It cools down
rapidly.
And because the volume is so huge, the velocity drops to almost 0. The smoke just hangs there.
It lingers.
It lingers against the cold walls. We call this residence time. And you want the smoke to have a short residence time in the chimney. Get in, get out. In a giant flue, the residence time is long. The smoke cools, it loses its buoyancy, and it can actually start to sink.
And this is where the chemistry gets nasty. The sources mention something called the slammer.
Ugh, the slammer. It's a slang term in the industry, and it makes every chimney sweep shudder. It refers to a specific and frankly lazy installation method. Someone takes a wood stove, they shove it into a fireplace, and maybe they seal the opening with a metal plate. But they don't run a new, properly sized pipe up the chimney.
They just slam the exhaust into the existing huge clay flue.
Exactly. You're dumping this little stove's exhaust into a giant cold cave. The smoke expands, it cools, and then it condenses. Wood smoke isn't just gas, it's full of vaporized chemicals and moisture. And when it cools, it undergoes a phase change. It turns from a gas into a liquid or a solid.
That is creosote.
That is creosote. So an oversized flue is basically a creosote manufacturing plant.
That's a huge hazard.
It is. You are literally coating the walls with flammable tar because the system is too big to stay hot. The physics just don't work. The gas loses its velocity and its heat simultaneously.
It's like trying to fill a fire hose with a garden hose. The pressure just isn't there.
Right. And for gas or oil appliances, it's a different kind of damage, but still bad. If you vent a modern, efficient water heater into a giant masonry chimney, the exhaust is already pretty cool to begin with. It expands, cools further, and the moisture condenses. But this condensate is acidic. It eats the mortar joints between the bricks. It can actually cause the chimney to collapse internally over time.
Yikes. Okay, so that's too big. What about too small? Scenario B.
Too small is like trying to jog while breathing through a coffee stirrer. The chimney physically cannot move the volume of gas the fire is producing. Friction skyrockets. The flow chokes.
I assume that means smoke comes back into the room?
It creates spillage, yes, but it also creates a pressure buildup. You can get something called backpuffing, where the pressure builds inside the stove and then suddenly releases, poof, into the room. And ironically, it can overheat the liner itself because you're forcing so much concentrated heat through such a tight space.
So we need the Goldilocks size. The sources mention specific ratios, like 110 or 112 relative to the fireplace opening.
Right. The codes, like NFPA 211 or the IRC, they have these formulas that are all derived from physics. And the goal is to balance velocity and temperature. You want the gas moving fast enough to get out before it cools down, but not so fast that it creates excessive friction.
It's amazing how precise it needs to be. It's not just a shoot for smoke, it's a tuned instrument.
It really is. It's a balance of forces. Buoyancy versus friction. Heat generation versus heat loss. And when you get the size right, the system just hums. The smoke stays hot, it moves fast, and it stays in a gaseous state until it's safely outside.
Speaking of tuning, let's talk about Section 3, the geometry of airflow. Specifically, the throat. Now, I know where my throat is, but where is the fireplace's throat?
The throat is the narrow opening right at the top of the firebox, usually where the metal damper plate is located. It's a gateway between the fire and that smoke chamber we talked about earlier.
And the measurement we care about here is throat height. So the distance from the top of the fireplace opening up to that throat, why does that, I mean, it's just a few inches of distance. Why does it matter so much?
Okay, so think of the throat as a traffic funnel. When a fire is burning, the smoke is rising in this chaotic, turbulent plume. It's swirling all over the place, and it needs to squeeze through that narrow throat to get into the chimney.
Okay.
Now, if the throat is too low, too close to the fire, the smoke hits that restriction before it has a chance to get organized. It's still just a chaotic blob. It slams into the damper, it bounces off, it creates turbulence, and then it spills out into the room.
The bottleneck.
It is a major bottleneck. But if you raise the throat, make that distance longer, you create a staging zone. You give the smoke vertical space to streamline itself. In physics terms, what you're trying to do is convert turbulent flow into laminar flow, smooth, straight layers of air. By the time the smoke hits the restriction, it's moving straight up in a tight column, and it just shoots right through.
The outline highlights Rumford fireplaces here. I've heard that name. They're the tall, shallow ones, right?
Yes. Count Rumford was a genius of thermodynamics back in the late 1700s. His fireplaces are famous for throwing a ton of heat into the room because they're shallow and angled, but they are also famous for drafting incredibly well. And one of his secrets was a very tall throat, often 12 inches or more.
And the code minimum is only 8 inches, right?
Right. And 8 inches works, but 12 inches works better. That extra height does 3 things. 1, it streamlines the flow like we just discussed. 2, it increases the negative pressure at the opening, which acts like a stronger vacuum cleaner, just sucking the smoke in. And 3, it acts as a shock absorber.
A shock absorber? For what?
For wind or hiccups in the combustion. If a gust of wind hits the chimney top or a log falls and creates a sudden burst of smoke, that extra vertical space can absorb the momentary pressure change without letting the smoke escape into the room.
So it's a buffer zone.
It's a buffer zone. It's like the suspension system on a car, just damping out the bumps.
That is fascinating. It's totally invisible. Most people look at a fireplace and just see the mantle or the color of the brick. But the geometry inside, that unseen curve in height, that determines whether you'll enjoy the fire or end up opening all the windows.
It's hidden engineering. A Rumford fireplace is essentially a nozzle designed to accelerate gas. It's beautiful physics.
Okay, so we've built the perfect machine. We have the insulation, the right size liner, the tall throat. But now we introduce the variable that ruins everything. Us, the user. Let's talk about Section 4. the fuel factor.
You are what you burn. You can have a Ferrari of a chimney, but if you put watered-down gas in it, it just won't run.
Let's start with moisture. We all know we're supposed to burn seasoned wood. But scientifically, beyond just it burns better, why is wet wood such a disaster for the physics of draft?
It comes right back to our mantra. Heat is the fuel. When you put a wet log on the fire, say 25% or 30% moisture content, the fire cannot burn the wood fiber yet. First, it has to boil all the water inside that log.
And boiling water takes a massive amount of energy.
Huge. It's called the latent heat of vaporization. You are consuming the fire's energy just to turn water into steam. That is heat that should be going up the chimney to create draft, but instead it's being used up right there in the firebox.
So the smoke coming off that log is a lot cooler.
It's much cooler, and even worse, it's full of steam. Steam is heavy water vapor. So you are filling your chimney with a cool, wet fog. It doesn't want to rise, it stalls. And because it's full of moisture, it condenses rapidly on the walls. So you get poor draft and massive creosote buildup at the exact same time.
It feels like a double whammy. You're lowering the temperature and increasing the mass of the gas you're trying to lift.
Exactly. You are asking the engine to do more work with less fuel. It refuses.
What about wood species? Hardwood versus softwood? I've always heard pine is bad.
Pine isn't inherently bad if it's seasoned properly, but it has different thermal properties. Softwoods burn fast, but they don't leave a long-lasting bed of coals like oak or hickory do. A marginal chimney, maybe one that's uninsulated or on an outside wall, might draft okay with oak because the exhaust stays hot consistently.
Right.
But then you switch to pine, and the temperature might drop just enough to fall below the buoyancy threshold.
So the chimney works fine one night and smokes the next, just because you switched from oak to pine.
Right. And the homeowner thinks, oh, my chimney is broken. No, your fuel just isn't potent enough to drive the engine you have. It's all about energy density.
And then there's the stuff we definitely shouldn't burn.
Mm-hmm.
You know, trash, pizza boxes, wrapping paper.
Please don't do this. I mean, aside from all the environmental nasty stuff, from a draft perspective, it's just chaos.
Right.
Paper smolders and produces fly ash, these little burning flakes that can start chimney fires, but plastics. Pizza boxes with grease.
The source mentioned glossy paper specifically, like from magazines.
Yeah, glossy paper is full of clay and chemicals. It creates a dense, sluggish smoke. It doesn't burn clean, it smolders, it floods the flue with heavy smoke that just sits there. It's the quickest way to choke a chimney. And the residue it leaves behind is not just standard soot, it can be sticky and really difficult to remove.
So the takeaway is stick to dry, seasoned cordwood.
Always. If you want the machine to work, you have to give it the right fuel.
All right, moving on to section 5. This is the one that I think will catch a lot of listeners off guard. It's about how we operate the stove. I call this the thrifty dad syndrome. I'm going to close these vents way down to make this log last all night.
Ah, yes, the starving stove myth. It is so pervasive. People think, if I restrict the air, the wood burns slower, I save money on firewood.
And technically, the wood does burn slower.
It does, but at a terrible cost. When you choke the air supply, you stop complete combustion. The wood stops burning with a bright hot flame, and it enters a smoldering phase.
And smoldering is cool.
Smoldering is very cool, and it produces smoke that is absolutely loaded with unburned particulates. That's tar, basically. So now you have a flue filled with cool, tar-heavy smoke. It moves slowly, it coats everything it touches.
And it creates a feedback loop, doesn't it?
It creates a dangerous one. Because you've cooled the fire, the draft weakens. Because the draft weakens, it pulls in even less air. So the fire cools further, it just spirals down until the draft effectively dies.
And the notes call this a creosote factory.
That's literally what you are doing. You are manufacturing creosote. If you run a stove like this for a season, dampering it down every single night to save wood, you can glaze the chimney with inches of highly flammable tar. This is the #1 cause of chimney fires.
Wow.
You save $10 on firewood, but you risk burning the house down.
And it damages the stove itself, right?
Yes. The chemical byproducts of smoldering are acidic. They eat away at the steel, they destroy the catalytic combustors in modern stoves. The stove is engineered to run hot. It needs oxygen to do its job.
So the takeaway here is really just let it breathe.
Let it breathe. A hot fire is a clean fire, and a clean fire is a safe fire. Modern stoves are designed to burn efficiently at higher temperatures. When you starve them of air, you are fighting the engineering.
It seems like burn it hot is the solution to almost every problem we've talked about.
It solves 90% of them. Heat cures the draft, it burns off the creosote precursors, and it keeps the glass on the stove clean.
We're down to the final section, section 6, The vent connector. This is what you call the last mile of the system, the black pipe that connects the stove to the wall. It seems simple enough, but apparently you can mess this up too.
You absolutely can. It's the bridge between the appliance and the chimney. If the bridge is out, traffic stops.
Let's talk about horizontal runs, the pipe going sideways to reach the wall.
This is physics again. Hot air wants to go up. It does not want to go sideways. When you force smoke to travel horizontally, it gains no buoyancy. In fact, it loses energy because it's just dragging along the pipe walls, fighting friction.
So that horizontal pipe is too long?
The gas cools down too much. By the time it reaches the actual chimney, it doesn't have enough heat left to rise properly. It stalls. That's why codes usually limit the horizontal length based on the chimney height. You can't have a 10-foot horizontal pipe going into a 10-foot chimney. The math just doesn't work.
And slope matters here too, I see.
Crucially, you never want a horizontal pipe to be perfectly level. It needs a slope. The code says at least a 1/4 inch rise per foot of run. You want the gas to always feel like it's climbing, even just a little. If it's level, or heaven forbid, sloping downward, you create what's called a cold trap.
It's a pocket of stagnant air.
Exactly. It acts like a plug. The gas just gives up and pools there. And again, pooling smoke leads to condensation and dripping.
Finally, elbows. The bends in the pipe.
I call them speed bumps. Every time air has to turn a corner, especially a sharp 90-degree turn, it creates turbulence. Turbulence is friction. Friction slows the gas. If you have one 90-degree elbow, okay, maybe. But if you have 2, 3, 4, you are putting so much resistance in the line that the draft simply can't overcome it.
It's like trying to drink a really thick milkshake through a crazy straw.
Exactly. Keep it straight, keep it short, and keep it rising. That's the rule for connectors. Every single bend is a penalty against your draft score. Okay, we're going to hit pause on your training session for just a minute. I know you're probably deep in the weeds of, a Flue liner tutorial or something, but we really need to talk about who is actually producing all of this content.
Right. If you're here watching these videos, you're already getting the benefit of the training. But there's a much bigger ecosystem behind this YouTube channel. We're looking at chimneysweeps.com, and it's pretty clear this isn't just a media company. It's more like a funnel, a vetting engine for the industry.
That's a really important distinction, because usually with these online directories, you just pay a fee, you get your pin on a map. Is that what's happening here? Is this just another pay-to-play model?
No. The documentation we have suggests it's the opposite. It seems like they're trying to solve that classic low bidder problem that plagues the trades. They're not looking for advertisers. They're building a vetted network. And that standard, it seems to come directly from the founder, Ray Gessner.
I was looking at his bio. You don't often see this kind of background. It's this mix of high-level academic engineering and, actual trade mastery. You usually get the guy in the office or the guy in the truck.
Exactly. And that combination is really the key here. Ray isn't just some tech guy. He has a master's degree in civil engineering. He's a licensed professional engineer, a PE in multiple states.
But he also holds master licenses, HVAC, gas fitter, plumber.
And he's a certified home inspector through NACI.
So he's looking at a chimney as both a structural engineer and as a hands-on inspector. But how does that actually translate to the platform? Is it just good branding?
It seems to be baked right into the gatekeeping. Because he understands the physics, the code, the actual science behind it, the platform can enforce a technical standard that, a simple lead gen site just couldn't. Which brings us to their whole gold standard vetting process.
Okay, right. So for the professionals listening right now, the ones who are already doing great work, how does the platform actually verify that? How do they filter out the noise?
Well, it starts with the basics, the non-negotiables. You have to have the proper licensing, general liability insurance, workers' comp, all of that.
The table stakes.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But the real barrier to entry is the CCI exam, the Certified Chimney Inspector Test.
And this isn't just one of those watch a video and click a button certifications.
Oh, far from it. Ray Gessner developed this exam himself to test for technical accuracy, safety knowledge. It's designed to be difficult. It's a filter, plain and simple. It ensures that if a homeowner finds you through them, they're not just getting a name from a list. They're getting someone who passed a really tough technical evaluation.
Okay, so let's say a listener runs that gauntlet. They've got the insurance, they study, they pass the CCI exam, they're in. What's the actual utility for them? Why jump through all those hoops instead of, say, just buying more Google ads?
Because it shifts you from just being listed somewhere to being part of an operational support system. The sources show a few key benefits. First, there's the proprietary inspection report software.
Which I'm guessing is based on those same engineering standards we were just talking about.
Precisely. It automates the reporting. So your paperwork has the same rigor as the inspection itself. Then there's the community. You get access to these monthly online forums, mentorship, networking. It's like a mastermind group for ethical operators.
And that brings us to getting the actual clients. Let's talk about the number 833-Chimney.
That's the engine. The website, that phone number, they drive homeowners who are specifically looking for qualified professionals. These are not people just shopping for the cheapest price. They're looking for vetted expertise for big jobs, relining, structural engineering inspections.
So it creates this kind of feedback loop. You watch the free training, like the video you're probably watching right now, to get better at your job. Then you pass the exam to prove you're good. And then the platform sends you customers who actually value and are willing to pay for that expertise.
It helps the good guys build stronger businesses because they finally stop competing with the companies that are just cutting corners. It really elevates the trade.
So I guess here's the challenge for everyone listening. You are sitting here right now. You're learning for free from one of the best sources in the world. But the real question is, are you ready to capitalize on it? Are you good enough to pass that CCI exam, to join the network, and be recognized as one of the best?
If you think you're operating at that level, head over to the site. Click Join Us.
All right, we'll let you get back to your training now. Thanks for listening.
This has been a massive amount of information. Let's try to bring it all together for the listener.
Sure.
We started with this idea that a chimney is a thermal engine.
Right. And like any engine, it needs three things to run. It needs structure. That's your insulation, your wall thickness, your liner size. It needs geometry, the height of the throat, the slope of the pipe. And it needs fuel. And by fuel, I really mean heat.
So what? Here, why does this matter to the average person listening right now?
It matters because when you understand the physics, you understand the risks. You understand that creosote isn't just dirt, it's condensed fuel that's waiting to catch fire. You understand that smoke in the room isn't just annoying, it's a dashboard warning light telling you the engine is failing. It's about safety, it's about efficiency, and it's about reliability.
I want to leave the listeners with a thought that really struck me while reading all this. We tend to blame the house when things go wrong. Oh, this fireplace is broken, or this chimney is just bad.
Right. We blame the hardware.
But so often, the chimney is just a passive machine. It's waiting for instructions.
And that's the provocative truth here. The chimney doesn't decide to smoke. The chimney doesn't decide to make creosote. We do that. We feed it wet wood, we choke the air supply, we stick an undersized stove in an oversized hole.
We are the drivers.
We are the drivers, and if you don't know how to drive the car, you can't blame the engine when it stalls. So next time you light a fire, ask yourself, are you driving your chimney or are you just stalling it?
Smoke, it doesn't just rise because it wants to.
No.
It doesn't have an instinct.
Right.
It has to be, pushed or pulled or engineered to rise.
Exactly. We tend to think of a chimney as a passive exhaust pipe, just a hole in the roof that magically sucks smoke out. But the reality is that draft is a mechanical function. It is a fragile system that relies on a specific set of variables.
Yeah.
Heat, velocity, and pressure differentials. It's not magic, it's fluid dynamics.
Sure.
And as we are going to see, there are forces inside your own home that are actively fighting against that physics.
That is what hooked me on this topic. It feels like a detective story, where the victim is the fire in your fireplace and the culprit might be your clothes dryer.
It could be.
Or your new kitchen renovation.
Or your basement insulation, or a rusty pipe, or simply the height of your ceiling. It is a complex web of interactions.
So here is our mission for this deep dive. We are going to look at the hidden physics of why chimneys fail. And we aren't talking about cleaning soot, not really.
No, this goes deeper.
We're talking about air pressure wars inside the building envelope. We have three main pillars to get through. First, the hardware.
Right.
Specifically the vent connector, which is way more important than I ever realized.
It's the critical artery of the system. If it fails, the whole thing fails.
Okay, second, the physics of the building itself. Something called the stack effect.
Which is the invisible war happening in every multi-story home, constantly working against your chimney.
And third, the competition. The mechanical systems in our modern homes that are literally sucking the air out of the room before the chimney can even grab it.
It is a comprehensive look at why the air moves the way it does and why, in a modern home, it often wants to move in the wrong direction.
So let's start with the hardware. The source material spends a lot of time discussing the vent connector. For those of us who aren't looking at a diagram, what exactly are we talking about here? Because I usually just think of the chimney as the bricks on the outside of the house.
That's a common distinction to miss. The chimney is the vertical structure, the masonry or the metal Class A pipe. But the vent connector is the pipe that connects the appliance.
Stove or furnace.
Right, whether that's a wood stove, a gas furnace, or a water heater, it connects that to the chimney itself. It's the bridge.
Okay, so it's the pipe you see in the basement or coming out of the top of a wood stove.
Correct. And its sole job, its only reason for existing, is to deliver hot gases from the combustion chamber to the chimney flue as quickly and cleanly as possible.
Quickly and cleanly. That sounds like a simple delivery job. Like a courier service for smoke.
You would think so. But the key requirements here are maintaining heat and maintaining velocity. You cannot separate the two. Draft depends on the gases remaining hot. Hot gas is less dense than the surrounding air, so it is buoyant. If it stays hot, it rises fast. If it cools down,
it gets heavy.
It gets heavy.
So the speed of the smoke is determined by the temperature of the smoke.
Directly. It's a one-to-one relationship.
Okay, so this brings us to the first major point of failure, the source highlights, the material of the pipe itself.
Right.
Single wall versus double wall. I see this silver pipe in basements all the time. Does it really matter which one it is?
It matters immensely. The source is very specific here. Single wall metal pipe is highly conductive.
Like a cooking pan.
Exactly like a cooking pan. It transfers heat very efficiently. So if you have a single wall pipe, it radiates the heat from the smoke out into the room rapidly.
Which might feel nice if you're trying to heat the basement, but...
It's disastrous for the draft. Now picture where these pipes usually live.
Usually a basement, maybe a crawl space, almost always the coldest parts of the house.
Precisely. So you have hot exhaust gas entering a thin metal pipe in a freezing cold basement. The heat just bleeds out through the metal instantly.
And the gas inside cools down.
As it cools, it becomes denser, heavier. It loses all that buoyancy.
So the engine of the draft, the heat is dying before it even reaches the chimney.
Correct. The draft struggles from the very first moment. This is why the source strongly advocates for a double wall pipe.
Type B for gas, I think it said.
Yeah, often called type B for gas or double wall black pipe for wood stoves. It acts as a thermos.
A thermos for the smoke. I like that.
Exactly. It has an air gap or insulation between the layers. It keeps the flue temperature high, which keeps the gas light and fast. It preserves the energy needed to push the smoke out of the house.
The source also mentioned something about condensation related to this cooling.
Yeah.
That sounds messy.
It's not just messy, it's destructive. If the gas cools too much inside the connector, moisture literally drops out of suspension. It hits the dew point.
I see.
In a gas appliance or even with wood, that moisture creates a liquid sludge.
And that liquid isn't just water, is it?
No. It's often acidic. It contains sulfur and other byproducts of combustion. So now you have acidic water running down the inside of your metal pipe.
You're corroding your system from the inside out.
From the inside out.
Which leads us perfectly to the next disaster scenario. Rust and deterioration. The source describes a rusted connector pipe as acting like sandpaper. That is a very visceral image.
It's an aerodynamic nightmare. We tend to think of air as just moving through space effortlessly, but friction applies to air just as it does to a car driving on a road or water in a pipe.
Right.
When the interior of that connector pipe deteriorates, it gets rough.
It creates drag.
Significant drag. That roughness creates turbulence all along the walls of the pipe. It physically slows the gases down.
So now you have a colder gas because of the single wall and a slower gas because of friction.
It's a double whammy, and it gets worse.
How?
Rust doesn't just make the surface rough, it eventually eats through the metal. It creates porosity. The source compares this to holes in a straw.
I love that analogy because everyone knows that feeling. You're trying to drink a milkshake, there's a crack in the straw, and you just get nothing. No suction.
That is exactly how draft works. It relies on a vacuum, a pressure difference the chimney is trying to pull. If you have holes in the connector, even tiny pinholes from rust, you are breaking the seal. You are pulling room air into the pipe.
And that room air is cold basement air.
Exactly. So now you have a triple whammy.
Oh, wait.
You are breaking the suction, you are increasing the friction, and you are diluting the hot exhaust with cold air, which kills the buoyancy even faster.
It's a death spiral for the draft.
It really is.
And I imagine, aside from the physics failure, there's a safety issue there, too.
Huge. If air can get in, exhaust can get out. Under certain pressure conditions, which we will talk about later, those holes become exhaust ports. You could be leaking carbon monoxide or smoke right into the living space,
Wow.
right into the room you're in.
So the takeaway there is pretty clear. Inspect your pipes. If they look rusty, they aren't just ugly. They are failing.
They're a critical system failure waiting to happen.
Okay, so we need a sealed, insulated pipe.
Yeah.
But even if the pipe is brand new, the source talks about how you install it.
Yes.
There's this concept of the protrusion. This is like a lazy installer problem.
It is often an installation error, yes. It happens where the connector pipe enters the masonry chimney, it goes through the wall and into the flue liner. Proper installation dictates that the pipe should sit flush with the inner wall of the chimney liner. It should be smooth, seamless.
So it looks like one continuous tube.
Right, but often an installer will shove the pipe in too far. Maybe they cut it a bit long and didn't want to trim it, so it sticks out into the airflow of the chimney.
Like a ledge sticking out into the shaft.
Exactly like a ledge. Now imagine smoke trying to rise up that chimney. It's spiraling up, and suddenly it hits this protruding metal shelf.
It has to go around it.
It has to flow around it. That creates significant turbulence.
And turbulence is the enemy of speed.
And it creates a dead air pocket right above the pipe. In fluid dynamics, whenever you have flow separation like that, you get a zone of zero velocity.
And dead air means cooling air.
Cooling air and dropping solids. That dead spot is where soot, ash, and creosote accumulate. So over time, that ledge effectively builds the dam of trash inside your chimney.
So you start with a restricted flow because of the pipe, and then it gets even worse because you're piling debris on top of it.
Exactly. You are narrowing the flue and choking the draft, all because the pipe was pushed in 2 inches too far.
It's amazing how sensitive these systems are. It's not just a hole for smoke, it's a tuned instrument.
It really is. You mess with the geometry, you mess with the physics, the whole thing collapses.
Speaking of tuning, let's talk about sizing. The Goldilocks dilemma.
Right.
I think the intuition for most people is bigger is better. If I have a small wood stove, but I hook it up to a massive pipe, that should be great, right? Lots of room for the smoke to move.
You would think so, but physics disagrees. The source calls this the reservoir effect.
The reservoir effect, that sounds stagnant.
It is. If you vent a small appliance, say a 6-inch outlet, into a connector that is 10 inches wide, the gases expand to fill that space.
And when gas expands?
It cools down. Thermodynamics 101. Expansion leads to cooling, and as we've established, cooling leads to slowing.
I see.
It creates a reservoir of stagnant, sluggish air. The smoke literally wanders around in the pipe instead of shooting up the chimney.
It loses its focus.
And it creates condensation again. A large connector exposes more surface area to the cold basement air. It acts like a giant condenser coil. This is catastrophic for draft.
Okay, so don't go too big, but obviously you can't go too small either.
No, that's the choke point. If the pipe is too small, it physically cannot handle the volume of exhaust the appliance is producing.
It's like a traffic jam.
Exactly. It's like trying to drain a swimming pool through a garden hose.
So where does the extra gas go?
It backs up. It creates back pressure at the appliance. If it's a wood stove, smoke spills out of the air intakes or the door gaskets right into the room.
Oh, wow.
If it's a gas unit, it might suffocate the burner or cause it to shut down on a safety switch.
And the source mentioned something about overheating, too.
Yes. In wood or oil systems, that friction and compression create heat buildup. You can actually overheat the connector pipe to dangerous levels because the gas is being squeezed so hard.
So you might see the pipe glowing red.
You might see it glowing red, a serious fire hazard.
So it has to be just right.
Just right, matched to the appliance specifications exactly. You can't guess. It's not a suggestion.
There's one more hardware complication the source mentions that I found fascinating. Shared systems.
Mm-hmm.
2 appliances using one chimney. I feel like I see this in older homes. A water heater and a furnace sharing a flue.
It is common, but it is treacherous territory.
Yeah.
The danger here is pressure imbalance. Let's say you have a big, strong drafting furnace
Okay.
and a small, weak drafting water heater connected to the same chimney.
The bully on the playground.
Precisely. The stronger appliance can literally rob the draft from the weaker one. It just dominates the airflow in the chimney.
So what happens to the little guy? The water heater.
The exhaust from the water heater tries to enter the chimney, hits the massive wall of air moving from the furnace, and gets rejected. It gets pushed right back out into the basement.
That is terrifying. You wouldn't even know what's happening because water heaters burn clean, mostly.
Right, you don't see smoke. You just fill the basement with carbon monoxide.
Oh.
This is why modern codes are very, very strict about sizing shared vents. You have to ensure the common vent can handle both, but isn't so big that the small appliance fails on its own.
And this leads to the final piece of the hardware puzzle, the thimble.
The thimble.
It sounds like sewing equipment, but I assume we aren't stitching anything.
No. In this context, it's the sleeve that goes through the masonry wall of the chimney. It ensures a smooth transition and protects the combustible wall materials.
But what goes wrong here?
Well, if that thimble is missing, or blocked by debris, or if the masonry has collapsed around it, you just get turbulence and leaks. The source emphasizes that the connection point to the chimney is often the weakest link.
Gaps.
If there are gaps around the pipe where it enters the wall, air leaks in, draft dies, it all comes back to that sealed, smooth, insulated pathway. If you compromise the connector, you kill the chimney.
Okay, so that's the hardware. That's the pipe in the basement. We've inspected it, we've sized it, we insulated it.
We hope.
But now we have to zoom out. We have to look at the house itself. Because according to the source, the house is not just a box. It's a dynamic pressure system.
It really is.
This is where we get into the invisible war,
Yeah.
the stack effect.
Yes. This is one of the most misunderstood concepts in building science, but it dictates everything about how your home breathes.
So let's define it clearly. What is the stack effect?
At its core, stack effect is the movement of air caused by density differences due to temperature. It's the hot air balloon principle applied to a building.
Warm air rises, the simplest rule.
Warm air is less dense than cold air. So inside your heated home in the winter, the air is buoyant. It wants to rise to the top of the house.
Okay, so it goes to the second floor, then the attic.
And it doesn't just sit there. This is the key. It escapes. It finds every little leak in the upper envelope, the attic hatch, the recessed lights, the gaps around the plumbing vent, the tops of the walls. It pushes its way out of the house.
So the house is losing air at the top. It's bleeding warm air.
Constantly. Now here is the rule of physics. The house must be in equilibrium. You cannot just empty the air out of a house and create a vacuum if air leaves the top.
New air has to come in.
New air must come in at the bottom to replace
It
it.
creates a suction at the bottom.
Technically, it creates a negative pressure zone. The bottom of the house starts sucking air in from anywhere it can find it. Under the doors, through the windows,
And
and...
through the chimney.
Exactly.
Oh, I see the problem. The chimney is at the bottom of the house.
Usually, yes. The fireplace or the furnace is in the basement or on the first floor.
So it's a tug of war. The chimney relies on heat to pull air up and out,
Correct.
but the stack effect is using the entire volume of the house to pull air down and in to replace what was lost in the attic.
It is a direct conflict. It's a wrestling match. If the pull of the house, the stack effect, is stronger than the pull of the chimney, you get a reversal.
A reversal.
The chimney stops acting like an exhaust and starts acting like an intake vent for the house.
So cold air comes down the chimney.
Cold air, and if you try to light a fire, smoke. It spills right into the room because the air is literally rushing the wrong way. The chimney has been overpowered by the house.
The source mentions there are variables that amplify this. It's not the same in every house.
Right, think about the physics. Since it's driven by the height of the warm air column, taller buildings have a stronger stack effect.
So a 2- or 3-story colonial house,
It creates much more suction at the bottom than a little ranch house.
a bigger balloon.
Exactly. The taller the column of warm air, the more pressure it exerts at the top, and the more suction it creates at the bottom.
What about temperature?
The colder it is outside, the bigger the difference between inside and outside temps.
Right.
That increases the buoyancy. So, ironically, on the coldest days of the year, when you most want to fire, the stack effect is at its most aggressive.
That feels deeply unfair.
Physics doesn't care about fairness. On a 0-degree night, your house is pulling air in at the bottom with maximum force.
And leaks.
The more leaks you have at the top recessed lights are a huge culprit here. The faster the warm air escapes.
So it needs to replace it faster.
It demands a faster replacement rate at the bottom. It turns the suction up. A leaky attic guarantees a drafty basement.
I want to highlight something the source mentioned about basements specifically.
Yeah.
It called them the deepest part of the negative pressure zone.
Yes, because pressure acts in a gradient. The pressure is highest at the top where it's pushing out and lowest at the bottom where it's sucking in. The basement is as low as you can go.
So a stove in the basement is fighting a harder battle than a fireplace on the first floor.
Much harder. It is in the pit of the negative pressure. It has to overcome the maximum weight of the house's suction just to establish a neutral draft. If you have a basement appliance in a tall, leaky house, The physics are stacked, pun intended, against you.
It really reframes how you look at a house. It's not static. It's this breathing machine.
Is.
But the stack effect is natural,
Okay.
right? It happens just because the house is heated.
Correct. It's a passive phenomenon. It happens in every heated building.
But the source moves on to the third pillar, and this is where it gets really interesting to me.
Mm-hmm.
We aren't just dealing with passive physics anymore. We have actively introduced competitors into our homes.
The mechanical competitor.
Section 3. Negative pressure. This sounds like something from a submarine movie.
It's not far off. This is the modern problem. In the old days, houses were drafty. They breathed through the walls, the windows, the doors. They were sieves.
So if the stack effect was pulling or a fan was running, it didn't really matter because air just rushed in through the cracks in the walls.
Exactly. The house couldn't hold a vacuum. But now we build tight. We wrap houses in plastic like Tyvek. We foam the cracks. We install high-efficiency windows. The modern home is a sealed box.
A Ziploc bag.
Exactly. So what happens when you turn on an exhaust fan in a Ziploc bag?
You depressurize it immediately. The plastic sucks in.
You lower the pressure inside the box relative to the outside, and the house, again, seeks equilibrium. It needs makeup air,
And it looks for the biggest hole.
which is usually the chimney. This is what we call chimney reversal. The mechanical systems in your house fans, blowers, overpower the natural draft of the chimney. They are stronger than the buoyancy of the smoke.
Let's name names here. Who are the culprits? The source has a list, and some of the numbers are shocking. Let's start with the kitchen.
The kitchen hood. This is the heavy hitter. In a modern gourmet kitchen, people install these massive commercial-style range hoods. They want to look like a professional chef.
The ones that look like they belong in a restaurant.
Right. A normal residential unit might move 300 to 600 CFM, that's cubic feet per minute.
Okay.
But the high-end ones, they move 1,200 plus CFM.
1,200 cubic feet of air every minute. That sounds like a lot, but I need a comparison.
To give you a sense of scale, a standard open fireplace might only need 50 to 100 CFM of draft to work. This fan is pulling 1,200 out of the house.
It's not even a contest.
It's a slaughter. If you turn on a 1,200 CFM hood in a tight house, you create a massive air deficit instantly. The chimney cannot fight that. The suction from the kitchen rips the air down the chimney, pulling smoke, ash, and odors right into the living room.
It's amazing because people buy these hoods to clear the air, and they end up filling the house with smoke.
It's a classic unintended consequence. You fix one problem, cooking smells, and create a massive physics problem, backdrafting.
What about the laundry room? The clothes dryer?
A silent killer of draft.
A dryer moves about 150 to 250 CFM. But think about what it does. It takes air from inside the house, heats it, and blows it outside. It is an air pump.
And it runs for an hour at a time.
And it's often in the basement or first floor, so it is depressurizing the exact zone where the fireplace lives.
So if you have a marginal chimney,
Maybe one that's cold or on an outside wall turning on the dryer can be just enough to tip the scales and cause backdrafting.
so you might be fine, and then someone starts the towels and suddenly the smoke alarm goes off.
Exactly. It's that cumulative load. And then there are the bathroom fans. They seem small.
They are small, 50 to 110 CFM, but they are cumulative.
Death by 1,000 cuts.
Exactly. You have a shower running in the master bath, one in the kids' bath, the dryer is going, and maybe the kitchen fan is on low. Suddenly, you're moving 500 CFM out of the house. The house will find that air somewhere.
There is one device the source mentions that sounds like the nuclear option, the whole house fan.
The extreme scenario. These are fans designed to cool the entire structure by sucking air up into the attic and blowing it out the vents. They move thousands of CFM.
Thousands.
If you run a whole house fan with a fire burning, you guarantee a violent backdraft. It will suck the fire right out of the box. It's incredibly dangerous. You are essentially turning the house into a giant vacuum cleaner.
And we can't forget the HVAC system itself. The source mentions imbalance.
Right.
This one feels sneaky because the furnace is just circulating air, right? It shouldn't be changing the pressure.
Theoretically, yes, supply should match return. But practically, this is trickier to diagnose.
How so?
Say you have leaky return ducts in the attic. The system is trying to pull air back from the living room, but it's also sucking in unconditioned attic air through those leaks. Wait, no, that's not it. Let me get that right. If the supply leaks in the attic...
You are pushing house air into the attic.
Exactly. You are pumping the living room air into the attic where it is lost. You are emptying the house. That creates a vacuum in the living space.
Or What if you just close the bedroom door?
That's the other common issue. Door closure. You pump air into a bedroom, but there is no return vent in there. The door is closed, the bedroom pressurizes, but the hallway where the return grill is gets depressurized because the fan is starting for air.
So the system sucks air from wherever it can down the chimney.
It literally competes with the fireplace for the air in the room.
So let's look at the consequences here. We've talked about smoke scullage, but it's more than just a bad smell.
It's carbon monoxide infiltration. It's soot damage to your walls and furniture, and it's the frustration of simply not being able to use the fireplace. You try to light a fire and the smoke just rolls into the room. You think the wood is wet or the damper is closed, but the reality is your house is gasping for air and it's inhaling through the chimney.
It paints a very chaotic picture of the invisible forces in our homes.
It does. It shows that a home is a system. You can't touch one part without affecting the other. You can't just buy a bigger fan without thinking about where the makeup air comes from.
So let's bring this all together. We've looked at the pipe, the stack effect, and the fans. The perfect storm, as I see it, is when all these overlap.
Picture this scenario. You have an old house that you've recently renovated to be energy efficient. New windows, sealed doors.
So it's a tight box now.
A very tight box. And it's a cold winter night, so the stack effect is pulling hard on the basement.
The house is acting like a hot air balloon.
You have a wood stove in that basement connected with a rusty single-wall pipe.
Okay, so we have the hardware failure, heat loss, and friction, and the physics failure from the stack effect.
Now, you decide to cook a big dinner, so you turn on that fancy new range hood. And maybe you throw a load of towels in the dryer.
And that's the mechanical failure, the knockout punch.
That wood stove doesn't stand a chance. The draft reverses. The pipe is too cold to establish buoyancy. The house is sucking air down the flue to feed the kitchen hood. You have complete system failure.
And the homeowner is standing there wondering why their expensive wood stove doesn't work.
And blaming the stove, usually, when really they should be looking at the pressure dynamics of the whole building. They are trying to swim upstream against a current they created.
It really drives home the key takeaway here. A chimney is not an isolated component. It isn't just a brick tube.
Not at all.
It is part of a complex pressure system involving the entire building envelope and every fan in the house.
Absolutely. You cannot diagnose a draft problem just by looking at the chimney. You have to look at the house. You have to ask, is the connector pipe losing heat? Is the house acting like a vacuum? Is there a 1200 CFM fan running in the kitchen?
It's a holistic problem requiring a holistic solution.
It is. Sometimes the fix isn't touching the chimney at all. It's adding makeup air for the kitchen hood. It's sealing the attic leaks to stop the stack effect. It's insulating the basement.
I want to leave the listeners with a final provocative thought, something that struck me while reading through all this.
Okay.
We're constantly evolving how we build homes. We want them tighter, more efficient, greener. But as we do that, as we seal them up and install more powerful exhaust systems.
We are making the traditional physics of natural draft impossible to sustain.
Exactly. It seems like the modern home is becoming actively hostile to the traditional fireplace.
It is. The days of relying on natural draft, just hoping hot air goes up, are fading. In a leaky 1920s house, natural draft was easy. In a 2024 passive house, it's nearly impossible without help.
So it's the future. More backdrafting.
The source suggests that without mechanical intervention like dedicated air intakes for the stove, or powered chimney fans, or perfectly designed systems, the modern home will simply reject the fireplace. We are engineering the fireplace out of existence unless we engineer the solution back in.
A fascinating clash between old-school fire and new-school building science.
Indeed. We have to be smarter than the smoke.
You strike the match, expecting that satisfying crackle and, the warm golden glow to wash over the room. But instead of a roaring fire, you get chaos.
The anticlimax.
It's worse than an anticlimax. You get a face full of acrid smoke. I mean, it's pouring into the living room like you just set off a smoke bomb.
Right.
The smoke detector starts screaming, the dog is barking, your eyes are stinging, and now you're frantically opening windows, letting all that freezing air right back in. The vibe isn't just ruined, it's been completely evacuated.
It is such a visceral experience, and usually, once the panic kind of subsides and the alarm finally turns off, the first reaction is to blame the materials.
Oh, 100%.
You kick the log and you say, oh, this wood is too green. Or you look outside and say, the wind is just weird tonight.
I have absolutely done that. I've blamed the wood, the wind, the newspaper I use for kindling. I've blamed everything.
Yeah.
But today, we are learning that it is almost never just bad luck. It isn't a curse.
No.
It is physics.
Yeah.
And it's usually a failure of what we're calling the vertical engine.
That is the perfect mental model for this deep dive. I
Right.
mean, we tend to look at a chimney as just a stack of bricks, a passive hollow chute that smoke just happens to float up because, well, that's where the hole is.
Right, where else would it go?
But that is completely wrong. A chimney is a machine. It's an engine that's powered by heat and buoyancy. And like any engine, like a car engine, it can stall, it can flood, it can choke, and it can fail completely if the operating conditions aren't just right.
I love that framing because it takes all the mystery out of it. It's mechanical. So today we are doing a deep dive into the source material titled Atmospheric and Structural Factors Affecting Chimney Draft. And folks, this is not just about brick and mortar. We are talking about an invisible war taking place at the very top of your roof and some hidden enemies that are lurking inside the flue itself.
We're going to unpack everything from atmospheric pressure and wind shear to the microscopic structure of brick and the fluid dynamics of air. Because when you understand draft, not as magic, but as this delicate pressure differential, everything about how you build a fire changes.
Okay, so let's start right there with that core concept. What exactly is draft? Because I think most of us, myself included, we just assume smoke rises because heat rises, end of story. Why do we need to complicate it with pressure differentials?
Well, it seems intuitive, right? Heat rises. But draft isn't just rising air. It's a flow that's created by a difference in weight. Think of it this way. Draft isn't a fan sucking air out of your house. It's the result of a tug of war between the air inside the chimney and the air outside your house.
Okay, so set the stage for this tug of war. Who are the players?
The players are two columns of air. You've got the hot air, specifically the flue gases from your fire, which is physically lighter. It's less dense than the cold air outside.
Okay, that makes sense.
So because it's lighter, it creates a little bubble of low pressure inside the chimney. The heavy, high-pressure air outside wants to rush in to fill that void. And the only way it can do that is by pushing through the fireplace opening, which feeds the fire with oxygen and pushes that light, hot gas up and out of the chimney.
So wait, the smoke isn't just floating away on its own. It's being physically pushed up by the heavier air that's entering the bottom.
Exactly, it's buoyancy. But here's the catch, and this is the important part. This whole system relies on a stable pressure differential. You are trying to push a column of very light gas up a narrow tube against gravity, and you're often fighting against wind that wants to push it back down and air pressure that wants to cap it like a lid. It is an incredibly fragile ecosystem.
Okay, let's talk about those external forces then.
Yeah.
Section 1 of our deep dive is all about atmospheric factors, the invisible war happening above our heads. The source material mentions wind-induced downdrafts. Now, I have to challenge this one immediately.
Yeah.
I always thought wind would help suck the smoke out.
Okay.
You know, like if I blow across the top of a straw, the liquid rises up, right?
That is a great point. And what you are describing is the Bernoulli principle, or sometimes it's called the Venturi effect. And yes, under ideal conditions, wind blowing smoothly across the top of a chimney creates suction. It absolutely helps the draft.
Oh.
But the source material highlights a specific and frankly nasty phenomenon where wind doesn't blow across the opening, but crashes directly into it.
Like a head-on collision.
Exactly. Imagine the wind hitting the side of the chimney structure itself. If the chimney is short, or if it's near a complex roofline or a hill, that wind can curl over the top. Instead of creating suction, it creates a high-pressure zone right at the mouth of the flue.
So it's like an invisible hand just pushing down on the smoke.
Precisely. The technical term is a dynamic wind load. The wind hits the bricks, it has nowhere to go but up and over, and in doing so, it drives air down into the hole. The buoyancy of your little fire, that gentle upward float, it isn't strong enough to fight the mechanical weight of a 20-mile-per-hour wind gust pushing down on it.
The source used a really relatable analogy for this. It said it's like trying to walk out a door while someone is pushing it shut from the other side.
That's it. You might be strong. You might be determined. But if the person pushing the door shut, the wind is stronger, you're staying inside. And in this case, you is the smoke, and inside is your living room.
That makes perfect sense. Okay, so another atmospheric factor that really surprised me is something called a temperature inversion. This sounds like a term from a weather report, but apparently it's a total draft killer.
It is, and it feels almost unfair to the homeowner because you can't see it. This is what the source calls the lid effect.
The lid. So how does it work?
So normally in the atmosphere, air gets colder the higher you go. That's the standard lapse rate. You have warm air at the ground, cold air up high. This helps smoke rise because the smoke is always, or should be, hotter than the air it's moving into.
Okay, that's the baseline, the normal situation.
But sometimes, especially on clear, still nights, the ground cools off very, very rapidly. It radiates its heat into space, and it chills the air right at the surface. But a few hundred feet up, there can be a layer of warmer air that's still remaining from the day.
So the whole pattern is flipped. It's cold at the bottom and warm higher up.
Exactly, an inversion. Now, picture your chimney. The smoke leaves the stack, it rises maybe 3 or 4 feet, and then wham! It hits that layer of warmer air.
And because draft relies on the smoke being hotter than its surroundings.
The moment the smoke hits air that is warmer than itself, it loses all its buoyancy. Instantly. It's like it hit a glass ceiling. It literally flattens out like a mushroom cloud.
So it's not being blown down by wind, it just stops rising on its own.
It stops rising, and then because it starts to cool down, it actually starts to sink. It drifts down the roofline, it wraps around the eaves, and it can even be sucked back into your windows or vents. It's a meteorological lid clamped tight on your chimney.
That is wild. It explains those nights where the smoke just seems to hang in the yard and not go anywhere. Now, speaking of meteorology, let's get into the barometric pressure paradox.
Right.
This was one of those real aha moments for me in the reading.
It is so counterintuitive.
Right. Because generally I associate low pressure with storms and bad weather and high pressure with those beautiful clear days. So, logically, I'd think, low pressure means less atmospheric weight.
Right, so less weight pressing down on the chimney should make it easier for the smoke to escape, like taking a heavy weight off its shoulders. You would think that. And in a perfect physics lab, less resistance should mean better flow. But atmospheric physics is messy.
It's never that simple.
Never. The source points out a crucial nuance. Low-pressure systems are almost always unstable.
Unstable how?
Turbulence. Low pressure usually brings wind, storm fronts, and chaotic air movement. So while the static weight of the air itself is lower, the stability of that draft column is compromised. The draft becomes lazy, it wavers.
It lacks drive, is that it?
It lacks a consistent pressure gradient, but even more importantly, when the outdoor pressure drops significantly, the pressure inside your house becomes relatively higher, or at least more competitive. It becomes much, much easier for the negative pressure mechanisms inside your house, like what?
Yeah.
Like bathroom fans, your range hood, even just the natural stack effect of the building itself, to overpower the chimney.
So the storm outside makes the chimney weak, and the house wins the tug of war, literally sucking the smoke back inside.
That's it. But then high pressure, those beautiful, cold, crisp days, that has its own set of problems.
I always assumed those were the perfect days for a fire.
They are, eventually. But getting the fire started is hard. High pressure means the air outside is heavy. It's dense. It's packed tight with molecules.
Like trying to push your way through a crowded room.
Or think of it in terms of fluids. Imagine trying to push a balloon up through a swimming pool versus pushing it up through air. The water is denser. It resists more. Well, the thick air of a high-pressure system creates a similar cap of resistance. The chimney has to work much, much harder to punch through that dense air mass.
So that's why on those super cold, clear nights, the fire can be so sluggish at first. It's literally struggling to lift that heavy column of air out of the way.
Yes, it takes a lot more heat, a lot more energy from your kindling to build enough momentum to break through that density. Once it breaks through, it flows great. But the startup is a real battle against the sheer weight of the atmosphere.
And then you throw humidity into the mix. The source was pretty clear on this one. Damp air is heavy air.
It is. High humidity increases air density in a way that just makes everything harder. It clings inside the flue. But the bigger problem is that water vapor absorbs heat. If you are trying to start a fire on a foggy, damp day, you are fighting physics on multiple fronts. You have heavy air sitting in the chimney, and you have moist air outside resisting the exit.
And the smoke cools down faster.
It cools down way faster because the moist air is just stealing its heat, and as we know by now, cool smoke sinks.
So we've established that the atmosphere is basically trying to kill your fire before it even starts.
Yeah.
You've got wind, temperature inversions, pressure, humidity. But let's say the weather is perfect.
Yeah.
A perfect day. We move to section 2, the terrain and the termination. This is where the physical environment around the house comes into play.
The landscape of airflow. I really like that term because we don't think of air as having a landscape, but it does. It has hills and valleys and cliffs, all made of pressure.
The source talks about wind shadow. This sounds dramatic, like something out of a spy novel, but it's really just about where you park your house relative to other stuff, isn't it?
It is. To understand wind shatter, you have to stop thinking of wind as air
Yeah.
and start thinking of it as water. It's a fluid. Imagine a large rock sitting in a fast-moving stream.
Okay, yeah, I can picture that. The water flows over it and around it.
It flows over it, but what happens behind the rock?
Oh, you get those swirls, those little whirlpools where the water kind of curls back upstream for a second.
Teddy's vortices. That is exactly what happens with wind. If your house is downwind of a taller hill or a big line of trees or even your neighbor's new two-story house, you are in the wake of that object. You're living in the wind shadow.
So even if it's windy up high, the air right around my chimney could actually be swirling downwards.
It's completely chaotic. You get suction pockets and sudden downdrafts. The pressure fluctuates wildly from second to second. One moment you have a great draft. The next moment the eddy swirls down and pushes a puff of smoke right into your living room. The source emphasizes that this turbulent zone can extend quite a long way, sometimes 50 feet or even more downwind of the obstacle.
That explains why a chimney might work perfectly for 10 years, and then your neighbor builds a second-story addition, and suddenly your fireplace is broken.
Precisely. The landscape of airflow changed. And trees. Oh, trees are a real double-edged sword in this landscape.
Yeah, let's talk about trees, because earlier we mentioned the Venturi effect, that good wind blowing across the top that helps with suction. The source says trees can actually block that.
Right. If you have a massive oak tree overhanging your chimney, you lose that clean laminar airflow across the top. You lose that helpful assist. But trees create a secondary problem that is even more annoying: mechanical turbulence.
You mean the branches just moving around?
Yes. The source describes it as chaotic air movements. Think
Right.
about it. Wind hits a tree. The big branches sway, the little branches whip around, leaves are fluttering. The air is just chopped up into little pieces. It becomes turbulent.
So instead of a steady stream of helpful wind, the chimney top is getting hit with all these random pulses of air from different directions.
Exactly. And it creates a pulsing effect in the fireplace. The wind gusts, the branches sway, the pressure at the chimney top drops, then spikes, then drops again. Your fire might actually puff smoke into the room every 30 seconds, perfectly in rhythm with the trees swaying outside.
That sounds incredibly frustrating to diagnose. You'd be sitting there checking the damper, poking the wood, and the whole time it's the maple tree outside doing a little dance.
It drives homeowners absolutely crazy. And it's not just nature, it's the house itself. The source goes into detail about the architecture of turbulence. We mentioned skyscrapers creating vortices, which is kind of obvious, but even small details on your own roof can betray you.
You're talking about roof valleys and dormers.
Yes. Think about a dormer window. It sticks out from the sloped roof. When wind hits that dormer, it can't go through it, so it has to compress. It has to speed up to get around it.
Like putting your thumb over the end of a garden hose.
That's the perfect analogy. It accelerates. This creates a high-pressure deflection zone. If your chimney is located right next to that dormer or in a valley between two roof peaks, it's getting slammed with these compressed, accelerated bursts of wind,
The source called it backpuffing.
which is exactly what it sounds like. Rapid, sharp pressure fluctuations that literally puff smoke back down the throat of the fireplace. The chimney can't establish a steady column of rising air because the pressure at the top is changing every single second.
Okay, so now we have to talk about the very top of the stack. The hardware. The chimney cap. The helmet. The source material seems to suggest this is a really controversial little piece of metal. You need one, but if it's the wrong one, it ruins everything.
It is a delicate balance of trade-offs. If you don't have a cap, you have rain falling directly into the flue, which is a disaster we'll get to in a minute. But the moment you put a cap on, you are technically placing an obstacle in the way of the smoke.
So a restrictive cap is a bottleneck.
Right. The smoke is hot, it's expanding, it wants to leave. If the cap is too small or the design traps the gas instead of channeling it, it creates back pressure. It's like putting your hand partially over the exhaust pipe of a car.
And the mesh. The spark arrestor. This is a safety feature, right? To stop embers from flying out and burning down the neighborhood.
It's vital for safety, absolutely necessary, but mechanically, it's a huge potential problem. The source points out that if the mesh openings are too small, they act like a filter. And filters clog. They clog with soot, they clog with creosote, and in winter, and this is the really scary part, they freeze.
The ice dam of the chimney.
Think about the exhaust from a fire. It's full of water vapor. When that warm, moist air hits the freezing cold metal mesh of the cap, It condenses. It turns to liquid water instantly. And if it's 20 degrees outside,
It turns to ice.
immediately. Layer by layer, the mesh closes up. You can literally seal the top of your chimney with a sheet of ice while the fire is burning inside.
That sounds incredibly dangerous. If the smoke can't get out, where does the carbon monoxide go?
It has nowhere to go but back into the house. If you have a gas appliance venting through that same chimney or a coal fire, that is a life-threatening situation. It effectively seals the entire system.
That is absolutely terrifying. So you need a cap to stop the rain, but the cap can freeze shut. Which leads us perfectly into section 3. The source material calls moisture the archenemy of draft.
I cannot stress this enough. If you take one single thing away from this deep dive, let it be this. Water steals heat. And since heat draft is thermal energy, water is the #1 killer of draft.
The text used the phrase thermal anchor. I like that.
It's a great visual. A wet chimney is anchored to the ground. It cannot lift the smoke. See, we need the flue gases to stay hot, to stay light. Water has a massive heat capacity. It just absorbs energy like a sponge.
Okay, let's walk through the physics of cooling here, because I think people underestimate just how much energy water can suck up. We have direct rain, obviously.
Rain falling down the flue cools the gases instantly. That's simple convective cooling. But it also wets the liner, and now you have the real killer, evaporative cooling.
Like when you sweat.
Exactly. Why do you sweat? To cool down. As water evaporates from your skin, it pulls heat away from your body to break the molecular bonds and turn into a gas. This is called the latent heat of vaporization.
Okay, lay some physics on us.
To turn water from a liquid to a vapor takes a tremendous amount of energy, a huge amount. So if your chimney liner is wet, the fire's heat isn't going into the smoke to make it buoyant. The heat is being hijacked to boil the water off the walls of the flue.
So instead of a vertical engine, you have a vertical boiler.
That's a perfect way to put it. And the smoke hits those wet walls, it gives up its heat to the water, it cools down, it becomes heavy, and it sinks.
And there's condensation inside the flue, even if it's not raining outside, right?
Oh, absolutely. Especially in uninsulated masonry liners, the smoke itself contains moisture from the wood. When it hits a cold chimney wall, it condenses into water droplets. This water then mixes with the soot to create acids. The source mentions this acid actually eats away at the liner, making it rough.
And roughness means more friction.
More friction, which slows the draft. It's a vicious downward spiral. But the most insightful part of the source regarding moisture, and this is the part that made me stop and think about my own wallet, is the concept of the double heating requirement.
This blew my mind. The idea that you have to dry the chimney before you can even begin to heat it.
Think about a brick chimney that has been rained on for a week, or one that has a leaking crown. That masonry is saturated. It can hold hundreds of pounds of water. When you light a fire, the energy from your wood isn't going into heating the air to create draft. The first wave of energy is being used to boil the water out of the bricks.
So wait a minute. I'm throwing expensive seasoned firewood into the fireplace. I'm burning it, but I'm essentially just running a kiln. I'm wasting fuel just to dry out the structure itself.
You are paying to evaporate rainwater. That is exactly what is happening. And until that water is evaporated, the chimney stays cold. And a cold chimney doesn't draft. This is why you see chronic smoking at startup in damp homes. The fire is burning, but the engine is flooded. You might burn for a full hour before the draft actually establishes properly.
That is just incredibly inefficient. And the structural failures that let this water in are so sneaky. A leaking crown at the very top can turn the whole chimney into a wet sponge.
The crown is that concrete lid on top of the bricks. If it cracks, water just pours right into the chase. Or you have failed flashing where the chimney meets the roof line. That saturates the bricks low in the system.
The source also mentioned spalling. I've seen this, where the face of the brick kind of pops off. It looks terrible. But is it actually a draft issue?
It is a huge draft issue. Spalling happens because of freeze-thaw cycles. Water gets into the mud, it freezes, it expands, and it pops the face off. But the source makes a deeper point. A spalled brick is porous. The hard, protective outer shell is gone. You've exposed the soft inner body of the brick.
It's like an open wound on the chimney.
It is. And that soft inner brick sucks up water like a wick. It holds more water than the original face ever could. So a damaged chimney isn't just ugly, it's a thermal sink. It absorbs water more readily, which in turn cools the smoke more aggressively.
And then there's the absolute nightmare of wet creosote.
This is just nasty stuff. Creosote is the tar-like byproduct of burning wood. But here is the chemistry that matters. Creosote is hygroscopic.
Hygroscopic, what's that?
It means it chemically attracts and absorbs water right out of the air. So even if it's not raining, if it's just a humid day, the creosote in your chimney is drinking the water vapor. And when creosote gets wet, it swells up, it gets sticky and puffy.
So the tube that the smoke goes up actually gets narrower.
Yes, it physically constricts the flue, it increases drag on the smoke column, and because it's wet, it's also constantly cooling the smoke. It's a triple threat. It cools the gas, it narrows the path, and it roughens the surface.
That really sounds like a cholesterol blockage in an artery.
That is a very, very apt analogy. The artery narrows, the blood pressure changes, and eventually the whole system fails.
Which brings us perfectly to section 4. Blockages from within. We've talked about invisible air and water. Now let's talk about the solid stuff that's blocking the pipe. And we have to start with wildlife.
The wildlife factor is significant. And it's not just, oh, a bird flew in and flew out. The source describes nests as structural plugs.
Dense weaves of mud and sticks.
Right. Think about a chimney swift or a squirrel. They build nests that are designed to stay put. They use mud, thick sticks, sometimes even trash. They aren't just creating a little obstruction, they can be blocking 90% or more of the airflow.
And then there's the plug.
Raccoons are notorious for this. They don't just build a nest, they drag in insulation from your attic, branches, heavy material. They can create a near hermetic seal in the flue.
And the grim reality mentioned in the text, the smoke shelf. We should probably explain what the smoke shelf is first to understand why this gets so bad.
Okay, so the smoke shelf is a flat area just above the firebox, usually behind the damper. It has a very specific aerodynamic function. It's designed to catch cold down drafts and bounce them back up the chimney. It's a crucial part of the engine.
But if an animal falls in?
If a bird or a squirrel falls down the flue, they land on the smoke shelf. They can't fly straight up, and they can't get past the closed damper. So they die there.
And nature takes its course.
Decomposition. It becomes a wet, organic, turbulent mass. It completely ruins the aerodynamics of the shelf. So instead of smoothly bouncing air back up, the air hits this lump, and it creates turbulence. It disrupts the flow right at the most critical point, the throat, where the smoke is trying to speed up to enter the flue.
That's pretty gross.
Yeah.
But very effective at killing the draft. What about the chimney itself falling apart? The source mentions fallen tiles.
Yeah, many chimneys are lined with these square terracotta clay tiles. Over time, heat stress and moisture can crack them. If a piece breaks off, it doesn't always fall all the way to the bottom. It often wedges itself sideways in the flue.
Creating a choke point.
Exactly. It creates a little shelf that catches soot and creates more turbulence. It narrows the highway from 4 lanes down to 1. Or worse, you get construction leftovers.
This one surprised me. You mean tools left inside the chimney?
It happens. Mortar chunks, trowels, soda cans, pieces of brick that were just left on the smoke shelf from when the house was built 50 years ago. The homeowner has no idea why their fireplaces never worked right. It turns out there's a pile of dried mortar blocking half the throat.
And let's not forget the clean-out trap. This is usually in the basement or on the outside of the house, right? That little door.
Usually, yeah. It's the little iron door at the very base of the chimney where you're supposed to shovel out the ash that falls down. But if you never clean it out, the ash level rises and rises.
Why does that matter, though? It's at the bottom, below the fire.
Because the entire column of air needs a clear base to start from. Think of the chimney as a tube. If the bottom is filled with debris ash, dead animals, fallen tiles, the aerodynamics get messy. The source describes it as constricting the engine at the bottom. You want a clear vertical column. If the bottom is just a pile of junk, the air hits it and creates turbulence right at the intake.
It restricts the flow before it even has a chance to begin.
Exactly. The gases lose all their momentum immediately.
So, we've blamed the wind, the rain, the trees, the squirrels, and the bricks themselves. But now we have to look in the mirror. Section 5. Human error. The user interface problems.
This is often the hardest pill for people to swallow. Sometimes the chimney is structural perfect, the weather is fine, but we are just operating the machine wrong.
Let's start with the damper. This seems simple. It's either open or it's closed. How do you mess that up?
Well, it's rarely that binary. A damper is just a metal plate. It lives in this incredibly hostile environment of heat and moisture, so it rusts, it warps. The source warns that rust can make a damper look open. The handle is turned to the open position, but the plate inside might be stuck partially closed.
So you think you've opened the highway, but you've actually only opened one lane.
And even a partial closure is a significant choke point. It creates a physical wall that the smoke just smacks into. The smoke hits that slanted metal plate and rolls right back out into the room.
What about glass doors? I see people close them all the time to keep the sparks in, but then the fire just dies down.
That's the air starvation problem. A fire is a chemical reaction that consumes oxygen, massive amounts of it. A fireplace is basically a vacuum cleaner for the air in your room. If you close glass doors that don't have proper intake vents built into them, you are literally strangling the fire.
It creates a rich burn, is that the term?
It creates a smolder, the fire starves for air, it stops producing high heat, and when the heat drops, the draft drops. Now you're just producing cold smoke.
And cold smoke doesn't rise. We know that now.
Exactly. So you create this vicious cycle where the fire produces smoke that is too heavy to draft, which chokes the fire out even further. It's a suffocation loop.
And screens, like the mesh curtains.
Same principle, just less severe. If the mesh screen is too fine, or if it's clogged with soot from years of use, it acts like a wall against the air trying to get into the fireplace. It just cuts the intake. You need to brush those screens clean.
Let's talk about fire building technique. I feel like everyone has their own correct way to build a fire, but the source mentions positioning specifically.
Physics doesn't care about your Boy Scout badge. Physics cares about aerodynamics. If you build the fire too close to the front of the firebox, you completely miss the aerodynamic zone.
The zone being the throat of the chimney.
Yes. The throat of the chimney, where the smoke is supposed to go up, is usually towards the back wall. You want the plume of hot gas to go straight up into that suction zone. If you build the fire way out on the hearth, the smoke curls up, it hits the lintel, the top of the opening, and it just spills into the room because it completely missed the target.
So push it back.
Got it.
And bury the grate in ash. I am so guilty of this. I was
Okay.
like, oh, more ash means a higher coal bed.
And to a degree, some insulation is good, but the source says if you bury the grate completely, you block the air from coming up under the fire. You need that underdraft to fan the flames and generate really high heat. Without it, you just get a low-heat, smoky burn. You're choking the engine from below.
Now, this final point in the human error section is fascinating because it connects to modern architecture, the modern home paradox.
This is a huge, huge issue in new construction and renovations. This is almost the philosophical climax of the whole draft problem.
Okay, set the scene for us.
Old homes were leaky. They had drafty single-pane windows. They had gaps under the doors, uninsulated walls. They breathed.
Which was terrible for heating bills.
Terrible for efficiency, but great for fireplaces. A fireplace sucks hundreds of cubic feet of air out of the house every single minute. That air has to be replaced. It has to come from somewhere. In an old house, it was just pulled in through all those cracks in the walls and windows. The house provided its own makeup air naturally.
But modern homes are sealed envelopes.
We build them tight. Vapor barriers, triple pane windows, weather stripping, spray foam insulation. We do everything we can to keep the heat in. But when you light a fire in a modern tight home, the chimney tries to suck air out to create drag.
But the house won't let any new air in to replace it.
And it creates a vacuum, a literal negative pressure zone inside your house. The source calls it the vacuum effect. The house starts pulling against the chimney. It's a tug of war between the chimney trying to pull air up and the house desperately trying to keep its air in.
And the house usually wins.
The house almost always wins. The negative pressure becomes stronger than the buoyancy of the smoke. The smoke has nowhere to go but back into the room to try and equalize the pressure. The chimney essentially works in reverse.
That is just wild. We have engineered our homes to be so efficient that we actually broke the fireplace. So what is the fix for that?
The fix mentioned in the source is so low-tech it's almost funny.
What is it?
Crack a window.
Seriously?
Seriously, just crack it an inch. Open a window in the same room as the fireplace. It provides the easy path for makeup air. You are manually breaking the vacuum seal you've created.
It's so ironic. We spend thousands on triple pane windows and extra insulation to make the house airtight. And then we have to open a window to the freezing cold just to make the fireplace work.
It is the great paradox of combining ancient technology, which is what an open fire is, with modern building science. They are fundamentally at odds with each other.
So let's try and unpack the big picture here. We started this with a smoky room, and we've uncovered this incredibly complex web of factors.
We have. We've learned that a successful draft isn't magic. It is a fragile ecosystem. It requires the right atmospheric pressure, it requires high heat, it requires a clear vertical path, and crucially, it requires dry materials.
It really changes how you look at a chimney. It's not just a stack of bricks. It's a vertical engine that is constantly fighting this invisible war against the wind, the rain, the trees, and even the airtight construction of our own homes.
And we tend to blame the easy things. We blame the damp wood, we blame the windy night. But so often, the problem is structural. It's a cold, wet sponge of a masonry structure that simply cannot generate the lift required. Or it's a house that is starving the fire of the air it needs to breathe.
It makes you realize that maintaining a chimney isn't just about sweeping out the soot once a year. It's about managing water, managing airflow, and managing the entire environment around your roof.
Absolutely. It transforms the fireplace from a simple luxury into a machine that needs understanding and regular maintenance to function properly. It demands respect for the physics involved.
So here's a thought to leave you with. As we continue to build tighter, more energy-efficient homes, I'm talking passive houses, net zero homes, are we essentially designing environments where the traditional wood-burning fireplace is obsolete? Are we creating spaces where this ancient technology simply cannot function anymore without mechanical fans and complex air injection systems?
It is a completely valid question. The physics of the open fire are rapidly becoming incompatible with the physics of the modern efficient home. We might be witnessing the slow end of the traditional open hearth as we know it.
Something to mull over next time you strike a match. Look at your chimney, check your cap, think about that column of air, and maybe, just maybe, crack a window. Thanks for diving in with us.
Stay warm and keep the draft flowing. Okay, we are going to hit pause on your training session for just a minute. I know you're probably deep in the weeds of, a Flue liner tutorial or something, but we really need to talk about who is actually producing all of this content.
Right. If you're here watching these videos, you're already getting the benefit of the training. But there's a much bigger ecosystem behind this YouTube channel. We're looking at chimneysweeps.com, and it's pretty clear this isn't just a media company. It's more like a funnel, a vetting engine for the industry.
That's a really important distinction, because usually with these online directories, you just pay a fee, you get your pin on a map. Is that what's happening here? Is this just another pay-to-play model?
No. The documentation we have suggests it's the opposite. It seems like they're trying to solve that classic low-bidder problem that plagues the trades. They're not looking for advertisers. They're building a vetted network. And that standard, it seems to come directly from the founder, Ray Gessner.
I was looking at his bio. You don't often see this kind of background. It's this mix of high-level academic engineering and, actual trade mastery. You usually get the guy in the office or the guy in the truck.
Exactly. And that combination is really the key here. Ray isn't just some tech guy. He has a master's degree in civil engineering. He's a licensed professional engineer, a PE in multiple states.
But he also holds master licenses, HVAC, gas fitter, plumber.
And he's a certified home inspector through NACI.
So he's looking at a chimney as both a structural engineer and as a hands-on inspector. But how does that actually translate to the platform? Is it just good branding?
It seems to be baked right into the gatekeeping. Because he understands the physics, the code, the actual science behind it, the platform can enforce a technical standard that, a simple lead gen site just couldn't. Which brings us to their whole gold standard vetting process.
Okay, right. So for the professionals listening right now, the ones who are already doing great work, how does the platform actually verify that? How do they filter out the noise?
Well, it starts with the basics, the non-negotiables. You have to have the proper licensing, general liability insurance, workers' comp, all of that.
The table stakes.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But the real barrier to entry is the CCI exam, the Certified Chimney Inspector Test.
And this isn't just one of those watch a video and click a button certifications.
Oh, far from it. Ray Gessner developed this exam himself to test for technical accuracy, safety knowledge. It's designed to be difficult. It's a filter, plain and simple. It ensures that if a homeowner finds you through them, they're not just getting a name from a list. They're getting someone who passed a really tough technical evaluation.
Okay, so let's say a listener runs that gauntlet. They've got the insurance, they study, they pass the CCI exam, they're in. What's the actual utility for them? Why jump through all those hoops instead of, say, just buying more Google ads?
Because it shifts you from just being listed somewhere to being part of an operational support system. The sources show a few key benefits. First, there's the proprietary inspection report software.
Which I'm guessing is based on those same engineering standards we were just talking about.
Precisely. It automates the reporting, so your paperwork has the same rigor as the inspection itself. Then there's the community. You get access to these monthly online forums, mentorship, networking. It's like a mastermind group for ethical operators.
And that brings us to getting the actual clients. Let's talk about the number 833-CHIMNEY.
That's the engine. The website, that phone number, they drive homeowners who are specifically looking for qualified professionals. These are not people just shopping for the cheapest price. They're looking for vetted expertise for big jobs. relining, structural engineering inspections.
So it creates this kind of feedback loop. You watch the free training, like the video you're probably watching right now, to get better at your job. Then you pass the exam to prove you're good. And then the platform sends you customers who actually value and are willing to pay for that expertise.
It helps the good guys build stronger businesses because they finally stop competing with the companies that are just cutting corners. It really elevates the trade.
So I guess here's the challenge for everyone listening. You are sitting here right now. You're learning for free from one of the best sources in the world. But the real question is, are you ready to capitalize on it? Are you good enough to pass that CCI exam, to join the network, and be recognized as one of the best?
If you think you're operating at that level, head over to the site. Click Join Us.
All right, we'll let you get back to your training now. Thanks for listening.